We're living for the moment, now we're one with the world. I can't lose this feeling I get. My heart's in the right place, and so is my soul, yeah. I won't take no excuses for it. I want it, love it, need it, live it. I feel like something's missing when I do not have it. I feel it in my bones, gotta find my space. These emotions on my face, taking a toll, I gotta pay it forward. I'll give it all that I can. No matter what, I won't let up. It's in my soul, it's in my blood, and I won't take no for an answer. If it don't hurt me, it makes me stronger. Yeah. No what, I won't let up. It's in my soul, it's in my blood, and I won't take it no more. I won't. Oh, I'll be there. Just leave it to me. I know what I need. You'll find if you see. And if you believe, you live and you breathe, you'll find the key. Lifting me, lifting you. Can't go alone, let's do by two. Doing this together, it's me by you. All through the night, all through the night. This is me, this is you. When we get together, we can all pull through. I don't ever wanna stop this groove. Let's get it right. Take it to the Lord, then take it to the grave. Listen to the wise man, tell me what he say. Listen to your heartbeat like it still bleed. A little bit of hope, yeah, it's what we still need. Say a little prayer for the moment. Give what you got, just go in. Can't hold you back if you own it. Live your life like a chosen. No matter what, I won't let up. It's in my soul, it's in my blood, and I won't take no for an answer. If it don't hurt me, it makes me stronger. You know what, I won't let up. It's in my soul, it's in my blood, and I won't take it no more. I won't. Oh, I'll be there. Just leave it to me. I know what I need. You'll find if you see. And if you believe, you live and you breathe, you'll find the key. Know what I need, I know what I need. To find the key.
Chasing love in an empty bar. Pour a drink till I make it past. The midnight hour seems to come and go, but I know. Walk on up with a drink in hand, sipping mixers cause you can. And all the lights begin to switch off. You're chasing the light, holding on for life, fading out, chasing the night, chasing the night, chasing the night, holding on for holding on for life, feeding the high, chasing the night, chasing the night. Hotel rooms and city squares, champagne bottles, drum and snare. The sights and cities seem to fall away when you stay. Locked in love for a night or two, losing sleep just to get a few. Day to day you wanna stay out, you're chasing the light, holding on for life, fading in the high, chasing the night, chasing the night.
I knew he was gonna ask that.
We're living for the moment now, we're one with the world. I can't lose this feeling I get. My heart's in the right place, and so is my soul, yeah. I won't take no excuses for it. Love it, need it, live it. I feel like something's missing when I do not have it. I feel it in my bones, gotta find my space. These emotions on my face, taking a toll, I gotta pay it forward. I'll give it all that I can. No matter what, I won't let up. It's in my soul, it's in my blood, and I won't take no for an answer. If it don't hurt me, it makes me stronger. Yeah, no what, I won't let up. It's in my soul, it's in my blood, and I won't take it no more. I won't, I won't be there. Just leave it to me. I know what I need. You'll find if you see. And if you believe, you live and you breathe, you'll find the key. Lifting me, lifting you. Can't go alone, let's do by two. Doing this together, it's me by you. All through the night, all through the night. This is me, this is you. When we get together, we can all pull through. I don't ever wanna stop this groove. Let's get it right. Take it to the Lord, then take it to the grave. Listen to the wise man, tell me what he say. Listen to your heartbeat like it still bleed. A little bit of hope, yeah, it's what we still need. Say a little prayer for the moment. Give what you got, just go in. Can't hold you back if you own it. Live your life like you chose, and no matter what, I won't let up. It's in my soul, it's in my blood, and I won't take no for an answer. If it don't hurt me, it makes me stronger. Yeah, no what, I won't let up. It's in my soul, it's in my blood, and I won't take it no more. I won't be there. Just leave it to me. I know what I need. You'll find if you see. And if you believe, you live and you breathe, you'll find the key. Know what I need, I know what I need.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to RCI TV for round 3 of the RCI Endurance Championship. We're here at the Nurburgring for what is looking to be a very damp race for the 3rd round of the Endurance Championship. My name is Ryan Gill, I'll be your broadcaster for tonight, and joining me is RCI's dynamic commentary duo of George Smith and Jesse Lee. How are you doing tonight, George?
Ryan, Jesse, absolutely great. It's been a good Friday, it's been a good week, and I'm looking forward to some endurance racing. I'm so glad that the heavens have opened up and allowed for a sprinkling out on the circuit. So I like the fact that we might be racing here for a long time in what could be wet conditions.
Yeah, it's definitely looking interesting to have a wet race this early on in the season. Well, I say early on, we're at round 3 of 8 already, but I suppose if they were going to have a wet race at any circuit on the calendar, the Nurburgring is probably going to be one of the more favoured circuits. But anyway, we're getting towards the end of practice. We'll be switching over towards qualifying very, very shortly. But Jesse, 2 rounds in, and Matthias Egger and Fulvio Barzini lead the championship at the moment in the Orion Race Team Mercedes. What have you made so far of the general feel of the championship after the first round at Misano and the second round at Zandvoort?
Yeah, hello everybody, and I cannot believe it is the 3rd round. I actually just had to very quickly look down at my papers to make sure I was looking at the right championship today, but lo and behold, round 3 here at the Nurburgring, and my personal feelings are very simple. I think it's going to be hard to beat either the 126 or the 66 in this championship. I think that they've proved to be the 2 teams, that Orion Racing Team and Sidemax Motorworks. I think they've proven that they're going to be the ones to beat here, and I think it's going to be really interesting to see how they get on today. And one more other thing, I think if it continues to rain at the Nurburgring here on RCI TV, a lot of these guys are going to start to hate this track, because I think this is the 2nd or 3rd time in as many weeks that it's rained here. It's pretty incredible, but we're going to see today something very interesting. We're going to see how these guys deal with mixed conditions, or at least for right now anyway, and hopefully they get some sunshine in the race, but I'm not sure if that is going to be so. What do you think there, Mr. Ryan Gill?
Yeah, it's been very, very wet in the lead up to this race, of course, over the last week, and I think a lot of the drivers will have been preparing for this. It's only been dry on a couple of occasions over the week from what I've been hearing from a lot of these guys, so I think, they're going to be preparing for a wet race, and I think it's highly likely that that's what we're going to have. We have seen it before, where, conditions can be wet in the lead up to the entire race, and then it can just be a dry race, everyone is thrown off guard. And, there's nothing we love more than hours of people's preparation going to waste, and then they're put on the spot and they have to make the best of what they have available to them. So here we are, Darren King, 2nd in practice at the moment here. Of course, James Parker in the Project Alien Mercedes leads practice for now by almost half a second over the rest of the field. Of course, he's paired up with Ondrej Dedicek, and they've been one of the surprise packages of the season so far, and of course we saw them do quite well at Misano, a very good comeback drive, and then they, capped it off with another good finish at Zandvoort, and I believe sit 5th in the championship right now. I'll have to double check that. But George, as as someone who is quite familiar with the likes of, say, James Parker and Ondrej Dedicek, what have you made of, this kind of team, this this partnership of someone who is of, high esports caliber teaming up with someone who finds themselves on the lower end of pro or high silver?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a cool question to ask. I think James Parker extending out and finding a driver in a different tier to where he normally stands and trying to upskill them to bring out the best potential in them is just such a cool thing for someone like for James to do. It's adding back to the community, and I think that Dedicek, with the talent that he already has, being nurtured by the likes of Parker, goes a long way. And I've had the small privilege of having him in one of our teams prior when I've been doing endurance races with White Rabbit Gaming, and the feedback that I had from my drivers who worked with James was just how open he is to sharing information and how good he is at reading what people are doing incorrect and adding a little bit of an extra element into their driving standards. So, I know that his job out there with Coach Dave Academy is providing that coaching service out there, as well as developing setups. So I think when it comes down to ACC, you're not going to find someone that has quite as much experience as someone like James Parker in all the facets of the game. So yeah, I think that's a power combo coming through, and it is always cool to see a little bit of that outreach, not always just getting two aliens pairing up together, but seeing someone like James pairing up with Dedicek.
Yeah, of course, James Parker knows a lot, doesn't he? Of course, with the fact that he does work for Coach Dave Academy in those setups, and obviously a lot of positive news coming out about those setups and how helpful they can be for some people. Haven't had the chance to try them myself yet, but I would imagine that Ondrej Dedicek is definitely benefiting quite a bit, having access to those kind of resources, and of course coaching to an extent from James Parker, probably one of the best in ACC, I would think, to get coaching from. So, and some people, sorry Ryan, like some people are just incredibly quick but don't have the ability to explain that same skill set out. So some people are good at coaching but don't themselves naturally possess the same talents. I think James really comes from that really small fraction of people that has the talent plus the ability to explain it out and share the knowledge, and it's just such a powerful combination. Yeah, definitely. And another powerful combination is the Muka Motorsport team, which does not have the likes of Wolf Matuszka in it for this championship. Of course, it's I think it's Mitch Abonka and Phil Vitt lining up in that car for this season. They haven't had the best start to the season, have they, Jesse? It's been a very up and down season for them. I think they had to retire from Zandvoort, and they definitely struggled at Misano. So, they're coming here to a wet Nurburgring in the Audi. It's home turf for this car, as it is home turf for a lot of these cars, and this is really going to be the track where they need to get a decent result on the board if they're going to have any realistic chance of maybe a top 5 fight for the championship.
Yeah, I mean, they're quite a ways down in this championship. They're 18th place. They are way down the order here. That's not what we expect out of that pink Audi, is it? I don't really know what has... I mean, they just had a particularly difficult road to this point, and I'm not sure that Audi, if it continues to rain today, is going to give them anything that they need. Just incredibly unfortunate. They've had their moments where they looked incredibly racy and where they've had opportunities up inside the top 10, but alas, it has not amassed to anything inside the major positions. So it's going to be interesting to see what they're able to do here. Maybe today is the day that their season turns around. We know both those drivers for that team are incredibly talented, but they have not yet been able to put that 25 anywhere near the front. But I remain optimistic, hoping today is the day. Get a top 10, get some momentum, boys, get back in the fight. Still got a bunch of races left to go. Anything is possible.
Yeah, I think the rainy... Sorry, Ryan, I was going to say, like, the rainy conditions, right, are going to be that spanner in the works that I think a lot of drivers here might have been, like you alluded to earlier, prepared for, but doesn't mean that you're necessarily always talented there. Some drivers do just have that little special ability to navigate the wetter surfaces. So I like to see how that comes into the mix. And generally, in a two-man team, you might not have a driver that's as strong as the other in the wet conditions. So trying to learn from one another as you go, and you've always got that voice in your ear generally telling you not to pick up too many drive-throughs on your shared car, but also just giving you, that little helpful voice in your ear, that voice of confidence out on the circuit.
Yeah, and this has been another car, actually, that has done exceptionally well in its class so far. Alexander Karsten, of course, in the 2S Endurance Team Purple Audi. They took the win in the silver class, although they are labelled as AM. Our AM class is kind of broken down into a high AM, low AM categorization, so they have the same plaque on them, but they are running in a bit of a different championship. So Alexander Carlson, they've won the first 2 rounds for their class, and they're looking top of the AM class at the moment here, just outside the top 10 overall, so very, very positive for them. And we talked about last week, and the fact that you can't have one poor driver and one exceptional driver anymore if you're going to be competing at the top. And this car, by no means has it got an exceptional driver and an incredibly poor driver, but it does have 2 very, very consistent drivers for the class that they are competing in. And it's definitely showing with the results that they've pulled off so far 2 rounds into the season.
Qualifying's coming up from them, and for all of the drivers here, they're just trying to get the run-in for the car. They're trying to just find that balancing point where they can do a quick quali lap, but also then have a little bit of time out to just feel what the full fuel-loaded car will simulate in race conditions. So it's always good to jump into practice and just see what everybody's trying to do out on the circuit. And Jesse, when it comes into rainy conditions, it's also about that visibility when you're starting out in the pack. The amount of water that kicked up from the back of the GT3s in front of you onto your windshield is something that you can't actually practice for.
No, you can't really. The only thing that we can do, and this is something I do in preparation for a race that we know is going to be wet, I take a lot of the AI cars and I will line up in the middle of the field, the back of the field, wherever I think that I'm likely going to end up. And that's the only real practice you get with that, George, really, is just sort of simulating that. A lot of people, real racers, they like to get on simulators to simulate the track, learn the track, kind of get a feel for the car. One of the other things that we do as sim racers is we simulate the simulation. So we're 2 levels deep there, but that is one of the things you have, but it doesn't really equate to the real thing, because an actual sort of event is different. And one of the things about the Karsten team, the 222, they are going to be in the middle of the pack, or at least several rows back, you would imagine here. So not only are you 2-time winner, you got the 2 fastest laps for your class, all of those things, but now potentially if you have a wet start here, you're going to have to deal with that. That's just one of the things, and you're going to be in the middle, and you're going to be the leader in your class, but somewhere in this pack. Again, as if these drivers didn't need anything else that could possibly go wrong to be going wrong. It's just another level and another thing you have to plan on if you're going to be running in a lower class.
So as practice is coming to an end, we'll be moving forward to qualifying in just a moment. So wait for the last couple of cars to finish up their laps. And the 3rd round of the championship set to get underway very, very shortly. And I don't know about you guys, but looking at the conditions out there and how wet it is on track, of course we can see the forecast up at the top, heavy rain currently and expected towards the future. Of course, qualifying will be taking place on the Saturday, so conditions could change between now and when qualifying begins. But looking at the conditions out there, I'm kind of glad that we're huddled up here in the commentary box, social distance, of course. We've had to...
We're huddled to ourselves, yeah.
Yeah, we've all got a corner, basically, in this very small commentary box. And I'm glad we've got the heating on in here, because it's freezing out there.
Yeah, it's sort of chilly indeed. I don't know how the track was maintaining its warmth, considering how cool the ambient is, but it's not great. Anytime it's even mildly chilly and raining, it just makes it all that worse, really, doesn't it? But there you have it right there on your screen. 10 minutes of qualifying. Both classes going to get out there at the same time and get their Q laps in. No time for mistakes here, boys. Otherwise, there will be some making up to do in the race. Just that 10 minutes, and as you can see, confirmed track wet. Fairly warm, I would say, but again, with the rain, it does make it feel a bit colder, and no of the weather in this session. You are going to have to deal with this throughout. You know the track is wet. Hasn't been lost at this point. It is not drenched. I mean, it is drenched, but it isn't... what is that other thing that ACC can do? What does it say when it's standing water? What do they call that?
You're referring to damp?
No. I'm told that ACC does something whenever there are just complete like rivers going through it. There's an actual track dampness for that, but I can't remember the actual terminology it uses. But we are not to that point. It is merely just wet out there. All of these guys and gals will likely be on, I would assume, full wets at this point. No reason to do anything else. And almost certainly avoiding curbs as much as possible. Wouldn't you think there, George?
Yeah, you were saying maybe definitely on full wets. No one will be a madman out on dries in these conditions. I mean, 10 minutes is an absolute murderous run for a quali session in the wet. You can just see how many cars are out on the field. 32 cars line up here to try and set a quali time. And they're all trying to find a little bit of space to do so. Stefan Zero will come around the final corner and go down the start-finish straight to begin his first hot lap. Ryan, this is going to be an interesting one.
It definitely is. So Stefan Zero in the 42 Lexus begins the first lap of the qualifying session down into turn 1, Haukarken corner. Tight hairpin going into the first sector, and now we're into the Mercedes arena. Bit of a Marmite-like sequence of corners. You either love it or you hate it. And Stefan Zero working his way through turns 3 and now into 4, and there's a slight kink on the exit of this corner. Counts as turn 5 officially on this track map, and he makes his way now down towards the Valvoline curve. And this is a corner you've got to get really on the throttle really early. Then you come into this corner. This corner's a lot tighter forward curve than you initially give it credit. Don't go too wide on the exit. Of course, in these conditions, he won't be wanting to touch the curbs at all. Makes his way down towards Dunlop, the hairpin at the bottom of the circuit, and you can see how much he's having to turn the wheel, get the car round. Doesn't want to go too wide on the curbs and unstabilize the car. Now he makes his way up towards the Schumacher S's. So easy to lose the car on this sequence of corners in the dry, never mind the wet, but he keeps it held together, and it's looking very good at the moment for Stefan Zero. Now he comes into Michelin and then up towards Warsteiner, goes wide at Michelin and gets a bit unstable on the rear end, but manages to catch it. Now he comes out of Warsteiner onto the back straight, and now he only has 4 corners to go through Ad Van Bogen, completely flat in the dry and in the wet at this point, up towards the chicane. How much of the curb is he going to take on here? Not too much on the inside or the outside either. And he comes up towards the Coca-Cola curve for the final corner of the lap. How wide will he go onto the curbs? Not wide at all, actually. Nowhere near the grass. Up towards the timing line. It's a 2:01.326 for Stefan Zero, but it's immediately beaten by James Parker with a 2:07.
Yeah, that was actually pretty fantastic there to ride along and just be able to listen to that as Ryan Gill gave us a turn by turn, I should say, sort of description of what they're expecting. And like we theorized, not hitting too many curves at this point. And thank you guys to the lovely chat members who pointed out the track condition I was looking for, guys, was flooded. That is an option in ACC that I've never seen, but apparently is a thing. If the track's way too wet, it can become flooded instead of wet, but we are obviously not there. And something that we also haven't mentioned that is a no-duh moment, but we'll mention anyway. There's only one line around this track right now, guys, and that is the line that they're all running on. You venture off of it for even a split microsecond, and all of a sudden you are sliding around. You have literally no grip. You'd actually be surprised when you're online on wet tires on a run-in track like this. You'd be surprised how much grip you actually have. You can actually see it there, the difference between the sort of almost gray-white and the darker gray that they are running on. If you get in that lighter stuff, you're slip sliding around and it feels like you're on ice. But otherwise, it isn't really that bad. I mean, it's easy for me to say that here in the booth, isn't it? But James Parker, go on.
The comfortable JC Lee
I'm nice and warm.
calls it easy from his little corner, thanks to social
Easier!
distancing. And
Easier!
it's definitely going to be a tougher race if it was compared to dry conditions, and these guys are going to be pushed to the limits. I mean, a 10-minute super pole for them to go out. I call it a super pole. It's not really that, but considering the conditions, it's really not a lot for you to get round. James Parker comes around the line. Will he find that 2:05 that we saw earlier on? Stefan Zero goes top, but a 2.324 comes out and sends the Project Alien number 44 to the top of the grid. Stefan Zero in that Lexus, of course. A Lexus, a real lover of the wet conditions and really trying to find some more pace as the entire grid out here pushing themselves for better positions. Brito will take 24th. Currently up on his time, not down to 25th. Up on his time just slightly. I say that, a second up as he comes through the Schumacher S's.
So the number 13 Mercedes up on his time by 1 whole second at the moment. And of course, considering where he is at the moment in the field, it would only take him up by a couple of places. Of course, not everyone has set a valid lap yet, and in these kind of conditions it can be difficult. You need to get that banker lap in nice and early, so then you can start to push for further lap time. But you can see there quite a few people still not having set a competitive or valid lap time yet, and you can see here Bruno Brito has lost it coming out of the chicane, and that's going to be the end of that lap. So it's looking positive for the Mercedes driver, but he's going to have to go again.
If you go back and replay Ryan's commentary there, you will notice the exact moment that he saw the 13 start to lose it. It was way before he actually lost it. Ryan, you paused your commentary because you thought he was losing it, and only for about 100 or so feet in front of there for that to be confirmed that he was losing it. But that's the danger of that chicane. You get that chicane ever so wrong in these conditions, you get up over the curb, oh man, and you lose it in a completely different corner. Heartbreaking to lose it there. Can honestly say I can commiserate with you. I have done that myself 100 million times, but now you have to just reset and go at it again, and unfortunately his lap this time by will not be that good as well, because again, he didn't get a full run up. He was off into the gravel. But we are on board the 101 Bentley, the Big Bad B. This is going to be Fitzgerald. He's driving around, just left the Schumacher S's. He'll continue back down here, and we'll see exactly where he shakes out. 28th on the grid now, looking to improve. We've seen some good things out of this big Bentley in the first 2 rounds. Be interested to see if they're able to keep that up here in the weather. I'm actually not too sure or confident in saying how good the Bentley does in the rain, though I suspect it's pretty decent based on some of the races we've seen just recently. Going around the final corner here. Coming up, he will get an additional lap, will Craig Fitzgerald. So this is not the end for him, though he will have traffic in front of him. Fitzgerald comes across the line and doesn't improve, and we see he's going to get into a bit of a tank slapper there coming off the final corner as well. Everybody coming out of that chicane, guys, struggling for grip, struggling for time, and making mistakes.
So difficult to find the fastest racing line out when you are under pressure. You know that there's quick drivers out in the pro splits. You know that there are people watching out on the live stream, and you've got all of that in the back of your mind whilst trying to just find those couple of tenths. And it's all about just bearing all the pressure and doing what you do best. On board with Darren King down through Dunlop, and the number 38 Ford Zilla currently in 7th place. He's 4 tenths up on his lap time coming into the Schumacher S's, and he's just struggling to find some more grip. And you see him just keeping those hands on the wheel as clean and as consistent as possible. I mean, he's not trying to fight it too much. You know that you're going to lose time out there, but at the same time, you still want to try and get a little feel for the grip levels that you've got. So it's minor corrections at the wheel. And Darren King now 7 tenths up. So this is looking like a good lap from the Ford Zilla number 38. Just the chicane in the final corner to go. And he will get this lap in and this will be his final qualifying lap. So he's lost a little bit coming out through the chicane. He's dropped to 10th down. Final corner to go, keeping the back end of that number 38 in check. 5/10 up now. Will cross the line shortly. Jumps up to starting in 3rd place. So we'll start on the 2nd row of the grid. Yeah, very nice.
So Jaroslav Honzik finds himself in 8th place in this Lamborghini in
Where's
qualifying.
he been all qualifying?
He's, I think it's been Valentin Barrier in the car as Jaroslav Honzik takes the short way through the chicane and back to the pit lane. And
dear.
he won't be improving on his position, so the highest that Jardia and Valentin Barrier will start is 8th. Here's Joe McCauley for the Side Max Motorworks car, of course paired up with Tinko van der Velde. And they're 4th at the moment, breaking even on their lap time, so still a chance for Joe McCauley to improve, but he needs to find 0.3 of a second if he's going to knock Darren King off of 3rd place. I don't think it's going to happen into the final corner for Joe McCauley in the 66. Comes out of the corner, doesn't seem to have gained any time. No, he's lost time, so that won't be an improvement for him, and that will be the end of qualifying. So it's James Parker with Ondrej Dedicek in the Project Alien 44 Aston Martin that take pole position here at the Nurburgring for round 3 of the Endurance Championship.
Wow. We talked about the 44 in the lead up to qualifying. They're 5th in the championship. Matter of fact, everybody in front of them has at least a podium or a win. They're the first car in pro, or in this championship, I should say, that don't have any real stats on our stat sheet. They have big goose eggs, but they are also the most competitive of any of those cars, obviously, and they go ahead and they put a 1 in the pole position column. George Smith, does that culminate in a much-needed win to get them back in the championship today?
I mean, I think it all comes down to how the rest of the race goes. I mean, it's all the starting blocks that you need to get yourself onto, I suppose. But with a 2-hour race ahead, it is going to be an absolute grueling fight to the finish for everybody out here. And the fact that they do have to do those driver swaps, there are those potential mistakes that can come in from, selecting something incorrectly when you're coming into the pits. Anything like that can completely change the outcome of the race. You can see the reins at play, the usual tighter split gaps between the drivers or the teams, slightly exaggerated here. So quite a lot of the field not able to adapt to the pace that the likes of James Parker and Stefan Zero managed to get in their quali laps. But a really good quali session, considering they only had 10 minutes out here. So to do a little flyby of the grid here, James Parker and Stefan Zero line up on the front row, followed up by Darren King and Tinko van der Velde on the second row, Martin Lawrence and Michael Muthen on the third row, Phil Witz and Jaroslav Honzik on the fourth row, Alistair Gillies and Mikhail Sandstrom line up on the fifth row, rounding out the top 10, Lubomir Zeman, Jason Isherwood, Jordan Grant Smith of 11th, 12th, and 13th. Andre Felix, Eric Engman, Marco Ripper, Rabith Hauer, Jurek Sevenik, Martin Muthen, Carl Mathers, Sebastian Brunier, Karim Asawi, AJ Jones, Christian Stricker, Zyko Madzo, Dustin Wust, Fuchsen Vidovic, Craig Fitzgerald, Gunther Schuller, Andy Howard, Bruno Brito, Thorsten Roschek, and Mike Chadwick will then round out the entire grid. If I got some of the pronunciations of the surnames incorrect, I do apologize. I am good at English surnames generally, and I even butcher those. So my apologies to the chat. And JC, I mean, you can laugh with me. We do struggle with surnames. It's kind of one of the funner parts of our broadcast together. We get to learn all the nationalities together, and sometimes look like clowns together.
I have learned so much from people correcting me of how they pronounce their names and stuff like that. And I I enjoy it because, again, like you said, you get to learn. But I was just thinking when you were going through the grid, George, there's two smart people in this field. That's the 44 and the 666. You may be thinking to yourself, Jesse, how are there two smart people? Well, James Parker in the 44 is on pole, and that 666 gets to hit the brakes early going into turn one and doesn't have to be a part of this. And the 666 starts all the way in the back. Everybody else is in the danger zone, so to speak, today. And I'm not entirely sure how this is going to go down into turn one.
Are you predicting a little bit of chaos, Jesse Lee, out of turn one in the rain?
Well, George, I'm going to put it to you this way. There are, how many cars do you reckon that is? 30 plus cars?
33.
There are 33 cars. It is raining. It is wet. The track is fairly warm, but still mildly cold. And every single one of these guys is a competitor and an excellent driver. So, yeah, I'm predicting turn one chaos. And I am also predicting that our live stewards box is going to be busy for the first part of this race. And certainly we will bring you every update from our live stewards and help you understand, and us understand as well, what's going on in the race. Maybe sometimes we can't catch all the action because, well, we only have one camera here today. James Parker will start on pole in the number 44, fifth in the championship, not out of it by any stretch of the imagination. A good finish here today, a podium, let alone a win, would draw them right back in this championship. Sort of different, ladies and gentlemen, what we have seen in the first two rounds. You'll see that rain is a great equalizer, and in addition to that, it has shuffled up our top 10 of people that, well, all are usually there, but just in a different configuration. And that, of course, is why I'm going to go to Mr. Ryan Gill for his prediction of who's going to win today's race.
Well, Jesse, It's not usual that I go first in the predictions. So I see you've done.
You see what I've done there.
I see what you've done there. You tried to catch me off guard. However, I'm prepared tonight because I had a feeling this race was going to be wet in advance. And you know what? I'm looking out there today and I'm thinking to myself, there's only one winner here today, Jesse Lee. In my eyes. And in my eyes, that winner is going to be the 42 Lexus of Stefan Zero and Martin Schumacher.
That's a bold prediction. I'm going to go ahead and give myself the pleasure of going last. George Smith, who's your pick to win today's race?
I think I would like to back out the Project Alien number 44. I'm fairly confident that Parker has laid on the knowledge that he needs to do to his teammates, and we've seen the potential coming out from his quali laps. We've seen how he was dominant just in the practice sessions as well. So I think that the number 44 Project Alien Aston Martin will be my pick if I was going to put some money out on it tonight.
Well, you guys have picked the few front runners there. I think I'm going to go with third place. It's going to be two in a row for Darren King and the Fordzilla bunch in the number 38 Ferrari. They're going to figure out how to drive a Ferrari in the wet around the Nurburgring, and they are going to do the same thing they did a week ago, and they're going to win, and they're going to win big.
My favorite part of all of this is our commentator's booth is directly next door to our steward's booth. And our stewards, Aiden, Daniel, Jake, and Nico, are still looking in here at JC Lee, shaking their heads at him predicting chaos outs at turn one. Ryan, I mean, it's pretty humorous to see them shaking their heads at JC, isn't it?
That's not the only thing they're shaking at me.
Oh, it's unbelievable, isn't it? Every time Jesse Lee puts puts a statement out there saying, oh, there's going to be chaos or this car's going to win the race, the stewards know that car's going to be involved in an incident at some point during the race. They just know it's going to happen. They're already writing it down on the sheet. They're already logging it as happened before the race has even started. We've got 2 hours. It might happen on the last lap, but they've got it prepared there just in case. And yeah, I mean, the stewards, they do a fantastic job. We can't go without saying that. They give up hours of their time to do live stewarding, and they don't really get to watch the race. We get to commentate on the race. We get to enjoy the race live in the moment, and we get to hopefully convey that entertainment to you guys at home. And unfortunately, the stewards don't really get that benefit. They have to watch it after the fact. So they do a phenomenal job. And we're very, very grateful to them for all the work that they do. And of course, we're also very grateful to Race Department, AK Informatica, Raceface Speed Labs, and of course our new partner, Next Level Racing, who have come on board recently, and they're going to be giving out a prize at the 12 Hours of Bathurst happening next weekend. Yes, it's just about a week away from the 12 Hours of Bathurst. So exciting. Cannot wait for that race. But we live in the moment, and right now in the moment we're here at the Nurburgring for 2 hours of wet racing in the RCI Endurance Championship.
Yes, indeed. And it's going to be very important if you are James Parker to get a clean run down into turn 1, get clear of Stefan Zero, and get out in front and get out of Dodge here today. It is incredibly tricky conditions, a wet track, and only one really predefined line. 22 degrees, track 20 ambient, no wind to speak of, but also no sign of this rain letting up today as we go 2 by 2 by 2 as far as the eye can see. 30 plus cars here today. Glad you're with us on RCI TV, and we are just about ready to drop the green flag for round 3, and the green flag does indeed drop, and it is a clean getaway from the top 2 rows. But look at Stefan Zero on the outside making a run down into turn 1. They fan out 3 wide behind them, but their pole position is more than they can handle. James Parker out front, contact between Zero and King as they're side by side. James Parker is free up in first, Zero trying to hold on, King trying to go around the outside, Zero back down the inside. King going down the inside, can't quite get it done, has to fall back in line. Under pressure from Macaulay.
Exactly what they needed to have at the second place for James Parker. He needed Zero and King to fight it out. Looks like Zero has got himself ahead temporarily, and this is exactly where they need to start to slot in. They cannot let the leaders peel away too much. Muthen here having a battle himself between the likes of Lawrence, and it looks like Phil Vitz actually lost that position to Jardier. So Jardier getting through in that number 39 Lamborghini in the background. He's going to be trying to make up positions here, but Muthen still in a good spot to try and keep the pressure on. Keeping yourself up towards the front of the order going to be absolutely critical during the starting phase of this race. Managing it and then keeping control of your tires. It's all a long haul game here today, and our drivers looking like they got through turn 1 almost very cleanly if you look at the entire train of cars on the track map, Ryan.
Yeah, definitely so. It looked like a very, very clean start from a lot of these guys, and that's exactly what they would have been hoping for. And, well, Jesse Lee's prediction of absolute chaos down into turn 1 isn't proven to be the case, but of course...
I didn't say what lap they were going to have chaos
We still have an hour
in.
and 58 minutes of racing remaining, so let's hope it doesn't get too chaotic. At the start, as we've seen an Audi go off, I think that's Lubomir Zeben in the number 21.
Well, right, you are.
It is indeed, Jesse. He's doing some track donuts, a little action-packed replay here. We'll get to see just what happened to that red Audi on screen. And it is a difficult portion of the track. Maybe just loses a little bit of grip coming down as he goes through the chicane. It's, again, he's just trying to follow along.
Yeah.
Oh, he has lost it already coming in, and all the way around he goes, and all those positions just going past him as he tries to get himself back on circuits.
But yeah, the good news for him is there's an absolute pileup down here. I think that's the 101 Bentley that spun around there. We're going to have to find out exactly what happened to him. That looks like a tap. I don't know how you would get backwards there unless you got tapped. And yes, indeed, we're going to watch very closely these two cars, the Bentley and the Mercedes. Well, no, they're pretty spaced out apart. Are you trying to tell me that he did that by himself? No, oh, I see. He caught up to the car in front of him. They get collided. Oh, and another subsequent tap by the car behind him. And he has to do the same thing Lubomir Zeman did and just sit there and wait. Smart man holding the brakes, getting back out there. One good news for Lubomir Zeman, though, that previous incident, yes, he got to the back of that train, but he didn't have any damage. Cannot say the same for the 101 of Fitzgerald. That car will have, I would consider that significant damage, Ryan Gill.
Yeah, there's definitely going to be damage on the, well, a bit on the front and a bit at the back end of that Bentley. As to how much it affects him over the course of the race, we don't know. The benefit he does have is that if it's not too bad and he can carry it to the first pit stop, they can get it repaired and the car should be fine for the rest of the race. But they do live with the fact that they are going to be significantly further down the field than where they started. But 2 laps of racing about to be completed, and it will be James Parker, the pole sitter, that still leads the way from the likes of Stefan Zero, Darren King, Joe McCauley, and Martin Lawrence rounding out the top 5.
It was completely apt that Jesse Lee got to narrate the turn 1 lap 2 chaos that came out, and you know, the prediction of Jesse Lee doesn't disappoint. And although it wasn't the opening lap, a little bit of contact coming into lap 2 as we look at Jardier there in the number 39 Lamborghini, having a look towards the likes of Michael Muthen here in that number 18 Mercedes. And Muthen's got Lawrence in front of him, that Audi, and he's now got a lot of pressure coming out from that Lamborghini behind. Of course, Jardier being one of those drivers that was lucky enough to go out and get some of that Lamborghini experience along with some of the Lamborghini esports winners. So, I mean, good to see him out in the Lamborghini here. I mean, he's driven the Super Trofeo and some of the road cars in real life, and I don't think it was now the rainy conditions that would have prepared him, but good to see him out putting some pressure on. And Michael Muthen here is going to feel it, and it's always going to slow down his progress up towards the front. Psycho Madzo here caught up in a little bit of a battle. Looks like the likes of Jones and Harvey behind, as Jones actually, that's not going to be him. He spun himself out and beached it. Oh, big contact coming in. Body slam.
Lamborghini in the wet.
Slammed from the side, and the number 69 gets beached up, gets it out, and will resume the race. Down the order, the number 69 is now possibly some damage as well picked up, Jesse.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just saw in chat somebody mentioning that Lamborghini's in the wet. That is not a winning combination. And what do we see on lap 3 of the race? A Lamborghini going side by side, losing it a little bit and getting into a collision with Aston Martin there. So that is not great. We'll have to pay attention to the other Lamborghinis that we have in the field and see exactly how they go. I'm interested in how Jardier will fare with his Lamborghini out there today. See how that goes. As Michael Muthen thinking about going for a pass on Martin Lawrence here. Can he get it done? He's going to be in the unfavorable position of the outside. If he can't hold it, though, he might be in business. He will not be able to hold it. In fact, will fall under the watchful eye of Jardier. Jardier going way deep into the inside there. Can he do it? Oh, my goodness. Happy birthday, Jardier, as he stuffs it down the inside and gets the pass done. How can he do that? I can't do that.
Jesse, you know, I was just about to say, Muthen trying to have a look in front, taking those wider lines, just set that possible overtake up for Jardier, and he's not one to just miss up an opportunity there. But Muthen here just keeping Jardier in check. He's hanging on to the back, and in these conditions, this is absolutely
it's dangerous.
Crazy stuff. Yeah, it is. Down into what isn't going to be a 2x2 corner, going to have to settle himself back behind, but you can just see how much pressure is coming on, and Phil Vitt now entering into this as well. And this is incredibly close, tight racing in the wet for all these drivers, and they're just pushing it to the limits, and it's good to see them wrestling with the edges of grip and still pushing for those overtakes when they're potentially there.
Well, I tell you what, if I had 4 spots in a Lamborghini, I know that one of those would be filled by Jaroslav Honzik, that's for sure. The man is absolutely crazy, and he drives that thing off the walls. And that was an incredible move there, of course, set up by the fact that Muthen did try to go for an overtake on Lawrence, but left the door open, and Jardier took it, as he usually does with any advantage that he gets given. And he's up to 6th place. James Parker leading, by the way. There's been a switch for 2nd place. Darren King is in front of Stefan Zero. That happened off camera, so we haven't been able to catch that one, unfortunately. But the Ferrari has moved up into 2nd place ahead of the Lexus, and now Joe McCauley very close on the back of these two as well.
Yes, I have a suspicion something happened to Zero there because they were sort of in a line, but for him to get that close to be able to make that move, and the fact that Darren King is now 3.2 seconds back at James Parker, when before that all started he was about a little less than 2 seconds. Either something sort of major happened to Zero or they just got involved in a battle. We don't really know, but either way, King is by him. He will set his eyes on James Parker, who's disappeared up the road ever so slightly now, and we'll monitor that gap to see if he's able to close down. Doesn't seem like it right now. He actually lost about 3/10 in that sector. As we go back here for 14th place, Tones, he's leading AMCAR right now. He's about, I think this team's about third, maybe fourth in the championship in AM. Today, a win for them would be mega in their championship hopes. And he's just going to let those cars go around and not be a factor. So that's going to be very interesting. Yes, those are cars that are in the back of the pro field. And of course, that drops him down to 16th overall. But still, most importantly, he's first in his class.
Yeah, it's not about the overall fights when you're in these sort of situations, and I think that's a good bit of driving and some advice out there is to not take battles that are not necessary and could put yourself at risk. So he's going to let Grant Smith and Santos continue their fights out for their positions out in the pro class. Lawrence, he's got the pressure on. Of course, Muthan is the one looking to now put that on. Lawrence has Lawrence dropped down a position there from Jardier. He was in front of Jardier in the previous 2 laps, right? He has dropped down.
Yeah, so Jaroslav Honzik has made his way past Martin Lawrence. And we're starting to see a few penalties coming out now for a couple of cars. We've just seen 2 5-second penalties applied to the number 33 car. And I think it's only a matter of time before the stewards come knocking from next door and have a piece of paper to hand over to Mr. Jesse Lee.
Yeah, in fact, they have. Nico has done that. I'm always afraid of Nico, by the way, because I'm never sure if he's giving me bad news about a race team, as he does with his stewards inquiries, or he's telling me about something that happened in the race that we didn't catch. But today, I am afraid to say he is handing me slips of paper with bad news. Like Mr. Gill said, 2 incidents involving the 33 car on the first lap, one involving the 101 and one involving the number 69 car. 33 shown to be at fault for both of those. 5 seconds. I think that will add up to 10 seconds if my math is correct. Then, of course, a T turn 8 incident with the 722 and the 301. 15-second penalty awarded for the 722 causing an incident. Those are the 2 that we have so far. But guys, I just stood up and looked into their box. They are still furiously working. They are pencils down, as they say right now. So they are not done with us just yet.
And of course, they only have one man to blame for that, don't they, George Smith? And that will be Jesse. So the steward's hard at work. And we're not even 15 minutes into this race, and they've already got plenty of stuff to investigate. You can start to see on the track map on the right-hand side of the screen, James Parker has crossed the line to start another lap, and you can already see that the back end of the field just coming out of the Dunlop curve at the bottom of the circuit. So the field quite spread out at the moment, even though we're not even 15 minutes into the race.
It doesn't surprise me, really. I think the rain conditions are just something that people don't get time to practice enough of, and I don't think they're put into race scenarios enough in these kind of conditions to really push themselves a lot. You can practice, you can go up against AIs, you can do your practice starts, but when you start to race against drivers that are, just completely free thinking, it's a completely different ball game out there, and you're just at the same time fighting against your own mistakes if you're making them. You're trying to find time and then doing the same thing with other drivers on the circuit. So the slight spread in the field was almost what I had predicted after the quali times. I think the front runners haven't really disappointed. I think Darren King might be one to stick it to James Parker a little bit later on, but again, we've seen just how good Parker is when he does get himself into that rhythmic sort of flow. Lawrence here, following on board with that 404 Audi, gets a nice view back at both the number 18 and 25 cars. Muthen, of course, in the Mercedes and Witz in that Audi. Diego Lima in the Phoenix Racing Portugal 675 Aston Martin, currently in position to maybe have a look towards Lefe, and Visahi behind, putting some pressure on as well. Familiar with Arno Visahi from the South African side of things, the Retro Esports team coming out and doing this RCI Championship. Good to see some fellow South Africans out on track. And the 147 here is in a good position to hold out and look towards a top 10 towards the end of the race. It's all about setting yourself up. And just in front, we see Lefek goes wide. The 166 makes a mistake out from the chicane. And now the drag down the start-finish straight. I don't think that Visahi is going to be able to get alongside. They are all going to kind of just stick to their own lines down the start-finish straight. Thiago Lima going to elect to just take the inside line. Going to force Lefe to go around the outside, potentially try and cut him back. But Lima doesn't want to lose the inside line and hasn't done so. So is able to throw himself into the Mercedes complex with complete confidence and gets that move done. Looks like Visahi also going to get past the 166 Porsche at the same time. I think that Leff has actually made a big mistake, and we do see him parked off track. A little instant replay, just going to be enough to catch some donuts and some mandatory donuts in the rain before he gets himself back on circuit, Jesse.
Yeah, nobody likes soggy donuts, but, you know, that's the nature of this race. And if you haven't seen enough single-car spins yet, I got some news for you. You're going to continue to see that right to the conclusion of this race. That is how tough these conditions are. And the second you have to race somebody, you'll notice the majority of these spins are happening when you have to race somebody, when you have to go offline, when you have to alter your line, when you have to get back to the throttle, try and beat somebody. Those little moments like that, that's where you're seeing a lot of these incidents. We're seeing a lot of red numbers on the board here, and I'm not talking about their number placard to denote what class they're in. I'm talking about penalty markers. We're getting some more of those. I'm going to wait for a couple of those to manifest themselves before I read the penalty list. But again, just know that there are more coming. We didn't talk about this pre-race at all, really, but 3 mandatory pit stops here today. Driver changes also mandatory. So that is going to be a topic of discussion. And of course, I think there is sort of an ebb and a flow to pit stops. In this weather, I'm going to ask both of you this. We'll start with Ryan, but I also want to hear what George has to say about this. Does this weather kind of restrict you in your pit strategy today, or can you be as free with it as you normally would be?
I think I don't know. I mean, it's kind of hard to call, because I think on one hand it depends a lot on how each driver tackles it. We're just seeing a replay here in the hopes that we could have caught what happened to Joe McCauley, because he's dropped all the way down to 9th place, you may have noticed on the timing sheet. So unfortunately we couldn't quite catch what did happen to the Sidemax Motorsport Mercedes. But in terms of strategy, I think it's hard to call, because I don't think it changes your race too much. I think, you know, your possibility for strategy is still fairly open. I mean, in the wet, you're going to be using less fuel, but we have 35-minute stint limits in this championship, so it's not really like you can undercut or overcut someone by any significant margin. And I think it more just comes down to how your drivers do in the wet. If you have a driver that's maybe not so confident in the wet, you know, in normal endurance race circumstances, you'd like to put them in the car for the least amount of time. You don't really have that option here. So I think from a dry race to a wet race, in this scenario, I don't really think much changes, but I'm interested to see what George's opinion on it is.
No, I'm gonna pretty much lump onto the back of that. I don't really think that too much changes out there. I mean, if you've got a wet to dry race or a dry to wet race that's changing during the course of the race, then sure. But for now, I mean, whilst we see 30 minutes of rain still predicted for the foreseeable future, I think that things remain unchanged. Your tire sets are still your wet sets. You're not making that bargain call to maybe go out on slicks potentially. So I would definitely say, unless things start to change up and we see some dynamic weather conditions, it's possibly just the same regular under and overcuts that drivers can try and do. Martin Lawrence in this 404, whilst I ramble on about pit strategies, is looking like he's trying to take his Audi to Drift City. The back end trying to overtake the front end, and Phil Witt all over this news, JC Lee. He's aware of it. Michael Muthen is aware of it, and they are trying to capitalize, but very difficult. You pick a line that you want to overtake on, and you're suddenly on a very wet and slippery part of the circuit yourself, so you're not getting the traction down. And you have to wait till that ideal moment to decide to pull out and make that committed move, and hope that the driver has seen your fair chance. Look how defensive Lawrence is going up in front.
Yeah, he absolutely is. He's actually going to try and make the move here in the hairpin. They're going to be side by side. You don't want to be side by side in the Schumacher S's in the best of conditions. You certainly don't want to be side by side in the wet. And Phil Witt thinks a lot better of it and decides he will try again. Has to go defensive here. Michael Muthen right behind him, thinking about making the overtake. He's going to go wide here. Gets covered by Phil Witt. Nothing doing there. But one thing's for sure, that Mercedes is not giving up. But one thing I wanted to mention, George, when you were watching that was you had two Audis there. You had Lawrence and Witt, and you could just tell that those two cars are set up fundamentally different. Lawrence's car all over the place. Phil Witt's absolutely planted in these conditions. And that's just setup. That's how that team has set up the car. That's how they're comfortable with it. And maybe it has something to do with how hard they're driving it. Speaking of hard driving here, Michael Muthen get all over the back of Phil Witt like he's going to give him an oil change. Has to back off, in fact, to make sure that he can make the turn. And nothing doing there. But my goodness, that was almost Suplex City there for a second. If he would have been any closer, Michael Muthen that is, Phil Witt would have been spun around. Incredibly close. And good driving. And before all that was going on, I just want to talk about Stefan 00 had fallen back as far down as fourth, 2 seconds off of, I think it was Macaulay at the time, but has since been promoted back to third place. So I don't know what's going on with that car, but that car has certainly fallen off the pace. He's lost an additional second in the last couple of laps. So something amiss on the 42 Lexus. But let's not overlook Jardier and that number 39 Lamborghini. It looks like Michael Muthen just ditches it off the track. Found a wet spot. Could not brake, I suspect, here. Check this out. Oh, no, that's not the case at all. He just lost it off the corner and had to...
Yeah, I think it was exactly that, Jesse. Just loses it out, gets it onto the grass, and then has to coast the car back onto the circuit before being able to get back on the loud pedal. Phil Witt will love this, running up the field. Going to be able to continue that pressure onto Lawrence and maybe makes his job a little bit easier. Doesn't have to go defensive against any opposing moves that Muthen's trying to do. And just look at Phil Witt. He's trying to apex everything. He's trying to carry as much speed as he can through here. And I think talking about the setup, it comes down to that level of confidence that you then are able to bring out of the car beneath you. And if you feel confident, you can throw it in and you can brake a bit later. You can really push to the limits. And again, Lawrence going to try go defensive, has to come back across the track. Might cost himself some seconds, and all of this does play into the hands of Phil Witt. He knows that he's getting into the head of the driver in front. If you're committing to all these lines, you're very much aware of who's in your rearview mirror. And down the start-finish straight, they will drag it down. They elect to go onto the inside line. Phil Witt will just follow in Lawrence's footsteps. Lawrence will elect to go there, obviously, to stay defensive, and Phil Witt going to wait for him to pull out. He's done this before. Will he have a look down the inside? And a bit of a late move coming down, and the collision will come down between the two. Looks like Lawrence does manage to drive away from it, but Phil Witt's on the wetter line, elects not to pull back onto the dry line there. And just having a little look, he's going to get spun around, and it looks like Lawrence is going to move up. That's going to allow Muthen to then get back into
Yeah, I don't think there'll be a penalty there or anything like that, because Phil Witt's the one that obviously he lost out the most there. He mildly inconvenienced Lawrence. He maybe door tapped him there, but I don't think there's any significant damage there. But it was enough to send Phil Witt around. But considering Lawrence got away fairly cleanly from that. I suspect there will not
The
be...
ACC damage model can be so strange, though. I mean,
True.
little contacts like that can cost you a lot. So we're going to have to keep an eye out on Lawrence's pace and just see if he is affected or not. And that might change up that pit strategy that you talked about, Jesse Lee. That might be a potential change, having to repair some damage and add to the clock time. I think that's variable in any race. And just going to be about managing that. Vitt does get himself back into a little bit of free space. He's managed to just pull away from Muthen after that collision. And that's important, right? Is after a little incident or something's happened, you've lost the place in an overtake, is just getting back on the horse and getting back to those consistent times that you had before. Endurance racing is all about consistency.
Yep, you're absolutely right. It is, and that's the thing. You got to get back up on that horse, as we say. You got to get back, get your mind right, get back in it. And in Phil Vitt's case, you got to get back up there at the 404 Audi and try to make that pass again. And don't be discouraged. Ryan, I got to say, I am impressed with you. I am very impressed. Not only, and folks at home, going to peel back the curtain here a little bit. This man is not only commentating this entire series, he's the one bringing you these pictures that we're all enjoying, that I'm enjoying, and so is George. Ryan, what is it like being a broadcaster and a commentator at the same time? You've got a bunch of buttons and switches. It's all scary to me, but you're not even sweating yet. I mean, oh my goodness, Michael Muthen in the background goes full Tokyo drift style around the corner. He's going to pull back across the track, and that's going to be another collision with the car behind him. Tokyo drifting around the corner, and he's going to stop and make a very poor decision here. He's going to come back across the track and make contact with the car behind him. I believe that's Macaulay, and that was not a wise decision or a smart moment there. But either way, I think both of those drivers did get away. Or maybe that wasn't Macaulay. Maybe that was a lap car. I'm actually unsure now. They were both red Mercedes, but I'm not sure. But back to my previous point. Ryan, you're the one pulling all the levers and switches. You're the ones telling the story of the race. You're bringing us the camera angles, and you're also commentating. What is that like for you? Is it hard to do?
It's definitely a challenge at times, especially when you have so much going on. You know, in a race like this, you've got to be constantly monitoring deltas, making sure that you're keeping the cameras moving, making sure that you're not sat on the same screen for too long. Because it's a bit of a mix-up. You've got to keep the angles going, and you've got to make sure that people are enjoying what they're seeing, and trying to catch as much action as possible as you've seen is fairly challenging. But I enjoy it. Commentary is mainly been the thing that I've done in a past community and here as well, and I've done a lot of broadcasting as well. But it's just kind of been one of those things where I was saying, well, I'm not going to accept a normal broadcaster role. Obviously, we do have other broadcasters beside myself that do just do broadcasting. I mean, Nick Setnick primarily does broadcasting, does do commentary as well, and then of course we have Stewie, who primarily does broadcasting. Mike Jones, of course, does as well, but he dabbles into commentary. And I think, did we just see someone go? No, so didn't go off track. So yeah, it can be challenging, but I quite enjoy it. It's it's a different take on things, and someone needs to control the cameras, and I'm glad to be able to do it for everyone here at home tonight.
Rai, a man of many talents indeed. It's not easy to do the comms and control the cameras. We're looking at a little battle between Versace and Mikael Sundström as the Aston Martin leads over the Audi, and a handful on Versace's plate here for him to deal with, as Sundström looking to put the pressure on wherever he can. And it's all about, again, just getting your racing line down, not going overly defensive. We've seen how that overly defensive line here can cause you to run out wide and leave a nice big gap for someone to have a look on the inside. So it's all about just forcing the car behind you to get past you and racing your own race and not letting them get into your head too much. The number 147 here into the top 10, as I saw Phil Vitt jumping into the pits whilst Ryan was chatting to us earlier on. And some of those pit strategies, of course, that's where drivers are just going to decide if they're going to go in early, who's going to do what they need to do. They just need to manage it all together out on the circuit. Sundstrom on that lovely little splitter cam. I do love the customizable cams that ACC provides us with and allows us to tweak them up. The big mistake and very wide out of the chicane, and the easy pass coming out from Sundstrom. We'll be able to catch that on a replay. You'll see a little hop, skip, and a jump coming out from that purple Aston Martin, and he runs out wide. And then again, you can't stay on the accelerator pedal on that wet grass. You just have to get yourself back onto the black stuff and get yourself back into control.
Well, you see a lot of the cars running inside the top 10 coming in to do their first pit stop and their first driver change. And if I have one more tap on the shoulder by Nico, he's going to give me a drive-through penalty in the booth. So lap 2, turn 1 incident involving the 101 and the 514, 5-second penalty awarded to the 101. That's the Bentley we saw earlier that had contact. Then, of course, turn 2 incident, 34 in the 514, 5-second penalty for the 34. Turn 5 incident, the 514 and the 33, a warning issued to the 33 for contact. Turn 17 incident on the 4th lap, the 7 and the 269. 5-second penalty for the 7, causing a collision. Lap 3, turn 6, the 69 and the 224. 15-second penalty for the 224, causing a collision. Lap 9, turn 8, the 21 and the 13. A 15-second penalty awarded for the 13 for causing an incident. And those are the penalties. And the reason we bring that up is that we still another hop, skip, and a jump and a spin through the grass. And that is absolutely no man's land, way out there. And he's going to have to get that car back on the track. But those are all the penalties. And the reason I brought that up now is because all of these drivers will be serving those penalties in pit lane. We suspect, anyway, that they will be serving all of these penalties. And I have just been tapped on the shoulder again. They went back and they have done a lap 2 incident, turn 6 between the 7 and the 666. 5-second penalty for the 666, and a lap 7 incident involving the 666 and the 101, and a warning was given to the 666 as well. So that catches you up on all of the penalties. Sloppy racetrack makes for sloppy racing. Ryan, do you agree?
Well, I mean, it's always, you know, when you have wet conditions, I mean, it's always going to be more difficult, isn't it? I mean, there's so much, you know, it's so much harder to be consistent in these kind of conditions. And of course, you've got to remember, we've got Pro, we've got Silver, we've got AM drivers in this race. And, you know, people of all different skill levels are going to be competing against each other and racing on the same track. So it's always likely that mistakes or miscommunication is going to happen. And, you know, unfortunately, it's just a part of racing. We don't like to see incidents, but we know that they're going to happen. That's why we have a live stewarding team. If we didn't have incidents, we wouldn't need them. So, you know, Can I just say that quote, sloppy conditions, sloppy racing, is just so not applicable considering the small fraction of the field that these things have impacted. I mean, for the vast majority of the cars on the field, it's been very good, clean racing. You know Jesse Lee loves to throw a spanner in the works, though, just to rile us up.
Because he's a bit American. He likes to go, like, you know, over the top. I understand. Yes, Jesse.
George,
shout me.
I had one shot in this race to get a rhyming sentence in there, and I was going to take it. I, by no means, mean to implicate that the majority of the racing is sloppy. I am merely attempting I am trying to be Dr. Seuss of the racing world. That is all I'm trying to do.
Can you try and look to boost your rap career in a more positive way during our racing, maybe during the next races, or is that too much to ask?
Please do watch our podcast that we so dearly hope to reinvigorate at some point, Ryan, George, and myself. It is a lot like this, only there's no race going on in the background. But yeah, I thought it was clever, and I wanted to sound smart for 5 seconds, and you had to ruin it.
Can we put it to a vote, Ryan? Did he sound smart?
no comment on that particular
1 hour,
subject.
26 minutes left in the race here, and if you've missed the start, you've missed a lot. It's been absolute chaos to start this race. We've had spins, we've had thrills, and now we have the first of 3 mandatory pit stops. Dedicek gets in relief of James Parker now. He will have to cycle back through the field, unless, no, there's no way that he got out in front of the field. That timing and scoring will have to cycle back through. We're watching Valentin Barrier in the 39, seeing how high he can get back up the field. He's going to be scored as 4th, so no real change there at the moment. And they will continue to pursue the top 2 or 3 positions, as he is, of course, in relief of Jardier himself. It's been an interesting race so far. I think the rain typically does that, George, doesn't it? Where it goes from chaos to sort of, it's a different kind of racing is what I'm trying to say. This race would be completely different if it was in the dry, wouldn't it?
It definitely would change things up. I think the rain conditions, I've talked about it before, I think it really does suit a certain style of driving. You are a little bit looser out on the circuit. We see Bonka just flashing on those lights here to the likes of Barrier, letting him know that, mate, I'm on your heels, I'll get past. But yeah, you either enjoy the rain or you hate it. So you're either in this round because you have to be in this round for the points, or it was something that you were looking forward to, and you knew that you had a slight edge over other drivers. So I think it does go out to space the field quite a considerable amount, considering the same cars, we've seen them out in previous rounds in the dry, remain a lot closer out there. But it's those margins of error that we kind of look for. I don't think every driver is 100% perfect in the wets. I think you'd have to be a complete mechanical being to be completely flawless. I think small mistakes do happen. Bonka here with such a rundown into the chicane. Where's he going to go, though, coming through? He's trying to bully the Lamborghini of Barrier into making a mistake. It feels like he doesn't have the place to move around here. So this is all that driving technique coming out. And he's just trying to put as much pressure on that Lamborghini as possible. And it's down the start-finish straights and down into turn 1 that we've seen some potential moves being made. It's not always easy on the wetter line if you're going to go for that inside line here. Bonka going to have a little look. Will there be the space? Does slow the Audi down enough. Barry giving some ample room, but there is the contact coming out. Both cars remain on track, and Jesse Lee doesn't get rewarded with chaos. It was a bit of controlled chaos, Jesse. Are you still with us? Are you okay?
Every time. That is the second time the 25s went down in that corner and there's been contact.
I can almost guarantee every time a car has a contact, there's some sound of what would be an animal mating in the background, and it's generally Jesse getting excited.
George, you would know more about animals mating than I ever would, but all I know is that every time...
I'm from Africa. I mean, we have plenty of wildlife. I mean, if you come out here, I can take you on a safari. If you're in the wilderness, there's definite cries like that from hyenas and such. So I'm just saying, you get excited by chaos, and you can tell me I'm wrong.
No, you're absolutely right. And I'll tell you one other thing, George. If you came to America, I would take you to an all-you-can-eat buffet.
I would take,
because that's what we're known for. You're known for wildlife. We're known for buffet.
And super size portions as well, according to
that's the one.
Everything that I see. Oh yeah. So when I go to America, I'll be treated out there. Ryan, give us an update on some of the racing.
Well, one of the big updates I can give you, George Smith, happened in the first round of pit stops. You may or may have not noticed it, but the 42 Lexus has found its way up into second place after it lost quite a few places at the start of the race after about 30 minutes of racing. And Martin Schumacher has got that Lexus back up into second place in front of the likes of Darren King and Valentin Barrier, which he had fallen behind those two cars. So good pit stop out from the number 42 car. And they found themselves 6.5 seconds behind Ondrej Dedicek, of course, now in the Project Alien Aston Martin. I'm interested to see what Dedicek's pace is like in that Aston Martin. Of course, we know James Parker, esports level driver. He's very familiar with the Aston Martin. we'd expect him to have a very good performance, and it's a car that performs well in the wet as, on top of that. So, we kind of expect James Parker to do very well. I'm very, very curious to see how well Dedicek does, and if he can maintain or even increase the gap from the Lexus behind.
Yeah, it's absolutely interesting because anytime you take a driver that's hot out of the car and you put somebody that, hasn't been in the car for, 35 minutes or whatnot, it is always a question of how are they going to perform, how long is it going to take them to get up to speed, that sort of thing. And that's what's really important here is how quickly Dedicek gets up to speed, how quickly Schumacher gets up to speed. What an excellent pit stop for the 42 that must have been. They were down the order a little bit, and to get right back up there, that is an incredible stop, and hats off to them. If you're the 38 team, you're sitting there going, well, how did we get pipped at the post? I don't understand. But that'll be something that will have to be sorted out in the film room. There's no way we will even know how they did that, but certainly they got it done. Van Wingerden here, watching him get hounded by Jeremovic behind him. It's actually going to get quite a big gap there in the subsequent corners, considering how close they were. You can see a nice, well, I wouldn't call it dry line, but a less wet line, we'll call it, sort of in the run-in areas now.
Dryish.
Dry. Excellent. George there. Dry-ish. In this battle here, I think this is going to end in the garage and fisticuffs if this keeps going on between these two drivers. Barry and Bonka going head to head. He's going to slip up. He's going to go a bit wide here. This could be what he needs to make this pass. Mitchell Bonka, that is. Bonka still can't quite get it done. He's going to have to surrender that again to Mr. Barrier, and they go back. Notice the tail again. Oh my goodness, they're so evenly matched around most of this track, George.
I kind of love that Barrier goes very deep down into turn one, where the little love tap came out between the two, almost to say, I'll give you some space. And the rear end going to be taken out here. Bonka is going to slow down temporarily, but I feel like he's going to continue to drive around. We get a replay, and we do see some chaos coming down. Valentin Barrier will drop down to 7th place after getting the car back on circuit. So the stewards will be having a look-see into that incident out on the circuit for sure. And a little bit disappointed to see how that finished up. I was looking forward to what was set to be a fight out. I mean, we saw some contact early on, and then a second contact coming out. I think the stewards are going to factor those two into their decisions. But Valentin Barrier, head down. Time to now make up positions and just know that other drivers could happen or get dealt the same fate as well. Mistakes happen. It's out in the rain, and you just you can only focus on what's in your control, right, Ryan? And at this time, it's just getting the car back into a consistent level on the racetrack.
Yeah, definitely, and we know that Valentin Barrier and Mitchell Bonka are two drivers that they don't give an inch, do they? They're happy to go side by side for the entire lap if need be to make up a position on the other, or defend a position even. And I mean, as we saw it, I think there's only one loser in that scenario if it goes to the stewards. And I think unfortunately it's the car that's already had two contacts today, trying to make overtaking moves, and I get the feeling it's going to be a fairly straightforward slam dunk from the stewards. I could be wrong. I haven't seen all the angles, I haven't seen all the inputs, and of course the stewards will have access to that, so they'll be able to give us their fair assessment on it once they've had a proper look at it. But I think that there's a rather straightforward penalty coming the way of the number 25 Audi, which is not what they need, considering that it had been quite a good race for them so far, despite there's a little bit of contact they'd had, that hadn't resulted in a penalty, as they kind of caused their own undoing. But, they really did need a good result today, and I get the feeling that they might be in for a strict penalty here.
Yeah, my whole thing is I talked about them in the pre-race. They just needed a good solid race to get some footing underneath them and get the sort of juices flowing. Talking about the 25 Audi team, of course. But I don't think that this is going to end the way that they wanted it to. And I think this is going to further prolong their sort of championship standing woes and their point scoring woes that they have, as we have another Aston Martin off there. It gets back onto the track, and that is merely the tale of how this race has gone for so many teams. Just can't give an inch, you'll lose a mile, and you can't go offline an inch, otherwise, well, you'll lose your car. Harry Conway in the 899. Haven't talked a lot about this team, the nearly on pace Triple R team today. Seen their car out here running in there amongst them so far, up into 9th place. Not doing too bad. I always expect the Audis to struggle in these conditions, so to have about 3 of them inside the top 10, that is pretty darn good. And of course, Conway looking at the 675 of Felix just in front of him, thinking about gaining yet another spot, George.
Yeah, Conway here is getting exactly what he needs to get done. And Felix is going to be feeling that pressure from Conway very shortly, as we just track on board with the little battle, and the front and rear splitter cam is going to come in really handy. I really love the lighting that ACC throws up, and we get to see just how the track wettens up and glistens under the headlights of that 899 from Conway. Andre Felix most certainly going to be on the defensive, and Conway's had some good exits out of a couple of corners, so it will be very much to the 675's awareness that he does have the pace. He is going to have to be very cautious of where he puts that car on the circuit. We've seen those doors being left open. We've seen drivers capitalize on those opportunities. And right now, the white and gold Audi roars down towards looking for that 8th position spot. And at every opportune moment, you just see him hanging out a little bit wider, Ryan. And, he's trying to just show and get into the mirrors, try and force that late braking mistake to come out. We've seen how that can be detrimental, and one small mistake coming out, especially into a complex corners like what they're coming into now, that can lead to a position changing spot.
Yeah, putting the pressure on your opponent, definitely what's going to be required in a lot of these situations. And with the conditions that we have out here on track, of course, it just makes overtaking that bit more difficult. And Harry Conway, well, Mikhail Sunstra will be watching this from the pit lane, just hoping that he doesn't go and get himself into any bad situations. An incident or a penalty now is definitely not what this team needs. And of course, the sister car for this team, the Triple R of Billy Octane and Brock McDood, unfortunately having to pull out of the championship. So this team, their entire championship hopes lie with the 899, and the 899 capitalizes on a mistake from Andre Felix, and Harry Conway makes his way up into 8th place. So just calm, composed driving from Harry Conway to wait for a mistake, pressured into a mistake, and the 899 moves up into 8th place.
Oh, continue to see some of these cars run wide. Again, you're trying to race each other here, and you're trying to make time, and then you go a little bit offline. That's a tricky, that chicane is dangerous even in the drive for the very reasons that you just saw there. Because like George said earlier, I think he said hop, skip, and a jump or something like that. You get up on that curb, that is a giant curb, and also there's a little anti-cut curb on top of the curb. So there's a curb on top of a curb, and then when you high center yourself, your car pops up into the air, and you go for a ride, and you don't have anything to steer with. And then even in the dry, you're going for one, but in the wet,
Jesse,
even worse.
Are you just looking at this action that's going on?
Yeah, I am.
Mathis Mathis as a pro driver, he's kind of caught up between some AMs fighting out for position. And, I
what he
mean,
did
coming
here.
out through... I mean, just...
Yeah, look what he did here. So he's going to lose out here to the second Aston here for a moment. And then all of a sudden, the leading Aston goes wide. The Astons are going to be side by side coming out of Mercedes-Benz Arena. They're still going to be side by side. They think they're going to lose it. That freaks out the other Aston Martin, and he gets 2 for the price of 1. That's a BOGO. And that's how you get that done. And that is what a pro driver's made of. Carl Mathis getting it done here, trying to get back in this. And unfortunately, he did get a 5-second penalty just a moment ago.
Can you explain for us non-American viewers what a BOGO is?
Well, I can, but I'd like to explain that there's I don't know if that was a Ferrari or a Lamborghini. It was some Italian car was off in that previous corner, but I can. BOGO is an acronym. It stands for buy one, get one free. And whenever you BOGO, well, he made the pass on one car and got the second one at no additional charge. So we call that a BOGO. Buy one, get one free.
What happens to the F in BOGO?
We don't pronounce the F in America.
Okay, I got you.
Anyway, moving right along from whatever nonsense that was, lap 9 incident, turn 6, the 224 and the 269. A 15-second penalty for the 224 was converted into a drive-through by benefit of that being the second 15-second penalty the 224 had received. An incident on lap 14, turn 12, involving the 7 and the 86, 5-second penalty for the 86. We still have not received word of any adjudication being taken against the 25 or any cars involved in that incident we talked about earlier. So that has not come across our desk yet. As racing continues here, more than an hour to go. Feels like we have been through the gauntlet so far as Haynes is getting all sorts of hounded from behind him by Mawson. Mawson thinking about cracking into that top 10. And you know what's better than 11th, guys? A top 10.
And of course this is for position in pro class, so Mawson has even more of an incentive to get past the likes of Haynes. It's not just for overall. Of course, there isn't really an overall points category in this championship, but it always feels better to finish ahead of everyone else, regardless of what class they are.
Overall front-running Porsche, if that counts for anything. I think as a non-biased Porsche fan, I will give him a championship title for that. I mean, we haven't seen too many Porsches out here, and Mawson definitely starting to get some good pressure out onto the likes of the AMG in front of him. But it is always interesting to see the different manufacturers take to the different circuits. They've obviously got their own different BOPs as per determined by the sims, and they have their sort of standout points, they have their standout tracks, and they have their tracks that they're not so dominant in. You know, Jesse, you were talking about the Audis in the wet being quite impressive, and there's a whole bunch of cars that are you know, well suited to more wet conditions, I suppose. That Lexus up from Schumacher also doing a very good job in the wet at the moment. Still a 5-second gap up front, but we follow on board with Ryan Mawson in that 1-2-1, an on-board cockpit view, as we just get a little sense of what it's like being inside or alongside the driver's seat. You see the rain being kicked up onto the windshield, the windscreen wipers going furious in front, and of course you get some of that spray from some of the cars as well. And the spectator view of what you get in terms of nose spray and all of that isn't quite the same as when you're in the actual sim. I felt in the race. I mean, you guys can disagree with me, but the visibility for us as viewers is made a little bit easier than what the drivers actually see here. Deep on the brakes, Ryan Mawson going to be forced to go around the outside, but Haynes going to match him for that, cover up that line, and set himself up for the Mercedes complex. And a couple of car lengths drop back is going to then just put that battle on ice before, again, just pushing those braking limits and trying to see where you can stop in terms of the car in front. And a little bit loose is Mawson on the exit. We see the back end of that Porsche coming out, and again, it's those small mistakes that just cost you from being able to then hound the guy in front. And that's what he wants. He wants you to go offline, get off of that drier racing line. You see it forming up on the circuit, everybody trying to stay on it. If your tires are getting a little bit too hot, you obviously can cool them off in some of the standing puddles and that on the circuit. You risk a little bit of the grip side of things. So it's all a battle as we switch back to Schumacher in that number 42 Lexus.
Yeah, Schumacher here dealing with some lap traffic here, trying to do the best he possibly can. See some of the AM field here bearing some damage from previous incidents. And this is sort of the, again, part of the ebb and the flow. You'll notice earlier, George mentioned that Dedicek had a 5-second lead on Schumacher. And what happened, it was well under 4 seconds there at the line just now. So this is what happens. Dedicek had to come through this lap traffic. It slowed him down. Now it's Schumacher's turn to come in and deal with this lap traffic. But the 25 car, Mitchell Bonka, is coming in for his pit stop. Now that is going to be way early and unscheduled. Ryan, any reason why you would come in now? He didn't have a penalty or anything.
No, I mean, it could be something like as a surprise pit stop strategy. We weren't quite following along with where he was in terms of other cars on the circuit, and potentially he was caught up in some traffic. He didn't find a way around. Vust here going to try and make a move on the likes of Sebastian Brunier. A little bit of contact, I feel, maybe not, but both cars coming away mostly unscathed. And Brunier in that 777 for Open Visor Racing Club is definitely feeling the heat. And Dustin Vust's Ferrari is very bright. I feel like he's tried to match the livery with what would be a retro Ferrari badge on the front of the car. You know, maybe if you went with the Lumo badge. But it definitely is a standout Ferrari livery. And Dustin Vust from the Vust brothers team, of course, going to be trying to get himself up the order, and he's just hanging into the toe down the start-finish straight. He's going to go around the outside. He's going to force Brunier to go in early for the inside line, and a big sweep coming down. But Van Winkenden, look at him capitalizing on all of this. He's seen the battle in front, and he's now potentially there. So Vust has to be very careful of these wider lines. We saw drivers robbed earlier on in similar fashion whilst trying to pass around the outside. The door goes open, Jardia sneaks in, and then Winkenden trying to maybe do the same thing. But he's, again, a driver that's not in class here. So he's, if anything, fighting for a position overall, which doesn't count for points. So it's that smart driving that we talked about before, picking the battles where you need to be, and very squiggly goes Vust. And I'm not quite sure how he's managed to control the couple of incidents that we've seen him have, but he's done a good job so far.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's kind of the thing. He's a pro driver, right, in that 99. They may not be inside the top 10. Heck, they may not even be in the top 15. It doesn't matter. You're still a pro driver, and that's sort of the difference. That's the difference maker, being able to save cars like that and not even lose that much time, if any. George, he just was sort of able to control that, and he gets right back to Sebastian Brunier in that 777. I'll be honest with you. I refuse to accept that is Sebastian Brunier in that 777, because seeing him in anything other than an Aston Martin is borderline sacrilege. If it wasn't a British car at all, I would just omit him from my personal results page. Is he knows how I feel. Sebastian Brunier, a friend and a compatriot of ours here at RCI, and also one of our members of our community team. I kid, of course, but it's just so strange to see him in anything other than an Aston Martin. These three cars continue to go at one another. Does Worst have something for him going down into turn one, going really into the slipstream? Worst is going to have to come out and go and cover to the outside. It still doesn't work, and Van Wingerden is going to get a run on him. Doesn't come to anything, but it doesn't matter. What a moment. He went all the way off the track to make sure that he was alongside of him there. Van Wingerden is letting them know that even though he is in third place in AM, he is going to fight these guys, because it could be the difference between a top 15. And who knows, if something happens up in front of them, it could potentially be even more positions. He could end up in second in class, or maybe even first if something would happen to Karsten for a bit, of course, but you never know. We've seen our second car here, by the way, also take their second pit stop of the race. Isherwood in the 147 has taken a second pit stop. So I'm wondering, this is way early. They can't make it to the end now. I think our stint timer is 45 minutes, I think. So they will have to come in again. Oh, wait. There, I am losing my mind. Of course they're going to come in again. They had 2 stops left to go. Yeah. So that is on strategy. I was looking at the wrong numbers in case anyone's wondering how I got that so wrong. But yes, that is
American maths, right?
No. It's normal math. It's just American brain. So Dustin Worst is still trying to get by Sebastian Bernier here. This battle has not let up at all. Will he try to go around the outside here? He's really thinking about it. Bernier over to cover, nothing doing as they go through the chicane. Don't want to get the chicane wrong, but Sebastian Bernier, everybody's going down to pit road. Sebastian Bernier and Dustin Worst both going down to pit road to get their second stop out of the way, and that will do neither of those men any favors. The only person that's favored is Van Wingerden.
I actually think that that actually caught both of them off guard. I think they both were on a part of the track that didn't look like they were going to go straight into the pits, and they both kind of did the same thing. I think each of them had the same thing in mind, is to get out of this battle as quick as possible. It's costing them a lot of time towards making up positions themselves, and now they are going to go out into the pits. We're going to switch back over to the battle between Barrier and Zero. Of course, that number 42 Lexus down into 9th place at the moment, but has served an extra stop over the likes of Barrier. And pressure coming on. The Lamborghini has to get off the gas on the exit of the corner, and Stefan Zero now on the inside line, dominant through the fast right-hander, will make a convincing pass on the number 39 Lamborghini.
Yep, well done there. Gets it done and keeps it moving. That's exactly kind of what you want to see happen there, as Barry is going to come down to pit road to serve his second pit stop. Driver change and tires, I would imagine, being thrown on to that number 39. As we see James Parker back into the car for the leading team. Dedacek does his stint and gains time on the 30, no, not the 39.
That's actually an overtake full position, Jesse.
Yeah,
Stefan
it's
Zero in the 42.
Oh, no, you're right.
Stefan Zero in the 42 has taken a theoretical lead of the race.
Yeah, how did that happen? Well, actually, we kind of know how that happened, didn't we? Because the 42 had such a magnificent pit stop the first time through. They figured out something on those stops that makes them quicker than anybody else, and they're gaining 3 to 5 seconds a pit stop, guys. Something majorly different happening on the 42 team, because that is the second time they've gained 3 to 5 seconds on a stop. And this time, last time, it was the difference between 4th and 2nd. This time, it was good enough to give them the theoretical lead.
Well, my timing board here, Jesse Lee, which gives me the pit stop timer for how long each driver's pit stop was. And I can actually see that both Stefan Zero and James Parker spent 1 minute 13 seconds .8 in the pit lane. So both of them spending the exact same amount of time in the pit lane, which indicates to me that they both had very, very good stops, as we see James Parker just making his way past, I think that's Stephen Vust's car. And, you know, that indicates to me that Martin Schumacher's made up a significant amount of time on Ondrej Dedicek towards the end of the stint. We knew he was closed up to about 4 or so seconds, I think, but it looks like he closed in a significant amount of time in the last few laps while we were watching the three-way battle for the 777. But of course, now it's all game again. Stefan Zero versus James Parker. This is technically the battle for the lead of the race. And it's going to come down to Lexus Aston Martin.
This is what we wanted to see, because we saw Parker pulling away in the front, contact coming out into...
Oh, no.
So that contact definitely going to put a bit of a dampener coming out there. Again, it's that inside move coming down. It looks like that inside line. Of course, you are on a very wet line. You can see the dry line on the left where you go to brake. And does Parker slow the car?
He's sliding, George.
He's sliding. He's not able. He's a bit of a passenger coming through. And Zero.
Devastating.
Unfortunate circumstance. Yeah, that I feel gutted for. I feel gutted for them.
And I'm sure James Parker feels gutted as well, because he wouldn't have wanted that to happen either. You know, he's the kind of driver that relishes a battle, and, you know, always would have been looking forward to maybe having a one-on-one battle with Stefan Zero for the lead of this race, so he won't be too happy about that as well. And, of course, everything, it will be looked into, as all the incidents are over the course of this race, and we'll keep you up to date if anything does happen regarding that incident. But what this does mean is that Stefan Zero is not leading the race anymore, theoretically, but he has still kept himself into second place, and that is the positive that the Tech 1 Racing team do still have.
Yeah, they had themselves a little bit of a gap out there, so although the contact came through, it does mean that there's a lot of work for them to catch up, and I'm sure they'll be hoping that a penalty gets issued out to the number 44 in front. And for them, it's then about just hanging on and holding that gap and making sure that if there is anything that comes out, they can benefit off it, because 4.5 seconds up the road, a 5-second penalty at the very least that comes out potentially would then grant them that again. So all of those to play for as we switch back over to Marcus Tunis in that 420 Aston Martin for Oman Racing. And for them, it's all about those positions in AM class. Of course, the pros and the AMs designated by the difference in color next to their car number. That is the little red or white box next to the mandatory pit number board with a little number 1, 2, or 3 mandatory stops for them to serve out here. I am not quite sure of where Marcus Tunis sits in class. Would it be 7th place for him at the moment? So within the top 10 for sure in AM. And it's a little bit of a different dynamic, I suppose, out on the circuits. Having faster drivers with slightly slower drivers based on their seeding times. It's all about the dynamic of racing, and having 2 different classes racing on track. It's like having 2 championships taking place at the same time every Friday night for 2 hours. And it means that each of those drivers also shares a car. So having all these drivers out on the circuit, 32 cars taking to the grid, each of those piloted by 2 drivers. It's plenty of drivers all participating and making tonight possible. So massive thanks to all our teams, all our drivers, an incredible team of stewards, of course, for handing out the penalties, and our lovely viewers out in the chat, leaving messages and interacting with us. We love the fact that we can be here and bring you guys some sim racing on a Friday night, and it's really top tier stuff. A lot of the drivers here are committing many hours into what they're doing in their craft, and it goes to show it's always good to see some good racing.
Very well said. Couldn't said it better myself, so I won't. But I'm just going to add on to the point. we are thankful to have you guys with us, to the drivers, stewards, teams, and everything here at RCI and RCI TV. And I would like to personally welcome you guys in and invite you all to leave a like and a subscribe to the channel. We have races going more often than not throughout the week and weekends around here. We don't want you to miss out on a single race. Stuff like what you just saw James Parker involved in with 7-0 in the 42. That's not uncommon. In fact, that happens at least once or twice a race around here. Usually with better results, must be said, but please like and subscribe and join us and stay up to date on all the races we do. And of course, RCI, we have many partners, and we would like to thank them for being partners with us in helping bring all of this fantastic racing to you guys. And as always, it is an honor and a privilege to share the booth with one Mr. George Smith, and the man behind the cameras and also commentating. He's our equivalent of the Iron Man, Mr. Ryan Gill. And guys, just reflecting on the first half of racing that we've had here, it's been chaotic. It's been pretty much what we expected we were going to see. We were very curious how the 44 would hang on to the top spot. We're awaiting a steward's decision on what's going to happen with the 44 and the 42, but it has been a race. It would not surprise me even if there is a penalty given out here, that it still wouldn't come down to the two of them at the checkered flag of this thing. It's just been that kind of race.
Yeah, it's the kind of race that you get the feeling we wouldn't have had. Well, like you said earlier, it would have been a completely different race had this taken place in the dry, but I guess that's the exciting dynamic that you have with these races, is that you're never really sure what you're going to get. And of course, remember guys, that this championship, it's 8 races long, so we still have 5 rounds to go. Plenty of time for these guys to get themselves back into the championship fight. But you know, we're gonna be encountering something we've never done before, Jesse, in a championship, and we're gonna be encountering a mid-season break. Or actually, it's not even a mid-season break, because we're not even gonna be halfway through the season. Of course, next week we will not have a race on Friday, and the reason for that is because the 12-hour of Bathurst is going to be taking place the next day, on the Saturday, 17th of October. So we will be encountering a bit of a gap week, and it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out for the 4th round of the championship at Nurburgring, because these guys, some of them will be competing at Bathurst and their focus will be on the 12-hour. Others won't be competing at Bathurst, and their focus is going to be what's going to be going on at 2 weeks' time in Nurburgring. And there's going to be very, very different levels of preparation for the next race, and I think that's going to prove to be very, very interesting.
I'm so excited for the 12-hour. Like, I'm so excited to fly out to Australia for the Australian comms box. I mean, that's going to be, an absolute cracker.
Does that mean it's going to be upside down then?
I mean, I think if you're 12 years old, it works that way around. But for the rest of us, we will still be upright.
I'm going to be upside down.
Can we get a kangaroo in the commentary box for us at some point, just for an interview? Because I mean, obviously,
I don't think you can just. I mean, I don't know what it is about you Brits and Americans. You can't just get wildlife into doing things. Like, you need to come for real safari. I'm telling you, you can't just get wildlife into comms boxes to do interviews.
George, you're going to have to accept at some point in your life that when you accepted to being in this box, you accepted that you were going to be in the box with 2 man-baby children.
I mean, I signed the disclaimer when we joined up with RCI, so they did warn me of the things that I would encounter. But, you know, I'm here to educate and bring you guys along with me. I've got so much animal experience here, and dealing with you 2 animals is rather easy.
Well, speaking of things that shouldn't happen but did happen, lap 14 incident 7 and the 86, I may have already mentioned that, but yes, I did mention that as well, so I will skip ahead. Lap 15 at turn 17, the 299 in the 514, 5 second for the 299, causing an incident. Lap 28 was the next penalty, so that was quite a gap there. Turn 2, 13 and 69, 15-second penalty for the 13 car. And Nico has just told me that he's not done with me, but we will go back to the penalty report. I gotta say, guys, realistically, for a race that has been ran under extreme, I would consider this fairly extreme conditions and all of that, it has been fairly darn clean. There's been a lot of little tit-for-tat sort of incidents, but there's not been any sort of crazy...
Not sloppy conditions, sloppy racing anymore, Jason.
No, you're absolutely right. It hasn't been.
It's been good.
It's been incredibly good. And just as we say that, as if we are being punished by somebody, the 420 of Tones decides to go ever so slightly wide there, just showing you exactly what happens when you get it wrong. Just a little bit not got the angle correct, and he goes for a little day on the beach. But today is not a good day to go to the beach because it is very wet. As a Brit, Ryan, have you ever went to the beach when it's raining?
I have been to the beach when it's raining, but not in the UK, funny enough.
In Spain?
It was in Spain.
I knew it was going to be in Spain. Rai has two stories. It's either in the UK or it's in Spain.
I'm a man of multiple cultures, and
Two to be exact.
I have it counts. All right, I'll take it for as long as I can, and I have been to the beach when it's rained, and it's not particularly a pleasant experience. I'm not the biggest fan of the beach myself, and I can tell you that adding rain to the equation does not make it better. It rather decreases the already low level of enjoyment that I was experiencing. But I can say that you know, with the conditions we have out here today, I have seen worse at the beach than the kind of conditions we've got out here today. It is very wet. It's heavy rain, as you can see by the forecast up in the top right, and no signs of the weather worsening or improving over the next 30 minutes, and I get the feeling that it's going to stay this way for the rest of the race. So it's going to be interesting to just see how these drivers will continue to cope. Of course, like Jesse said, it's not been too messy considering the conditions we have out there on track. But, well, some of the conditions that I've seen recently in races, going back to the McLaren Masters Cup at Barcelona, we had a bit of a monsoon over there in Spain, funny enough. So I've seen much worse conditions, as Marcus Turns is really starting to feel the conditions out there.
Yeah, that Schumacher S has not been good for him on the last 2 laps, and he's losing a little bit of confidence in his Aston too. So with 45 minutes left to go of racing, and as you mentioned, those weather reports give us a 30-minute prediction, it would be very strange to see things suddenly dry up in the last 15 minutes. I don't think the track would dry up enough for it to make much of a difference at all. But yeah, it's most certainly going to feel like a wet race for the remainder of this, and I'm not upset by it. So I said at the beginning, I like the fact that we got a bit of a spanner in the works round with some of the rain coming down. It really does separate mice from men, and it makes you appreciate the way that some of these guys have an understanding of what the sim feeling of driving in the rain is. I think a real life car, I mean, you've piloted a real life automobile at some point, I feel. If you are of driving age, it might not have been a race car, but in the rain conditions, you can kind of feel the car. You can feel what it's doing. If you slam on the brakes and it starts to slide, it's not just a little bit of feedback coming through the steering wheel. So I think for drivers to really get a good level of mastery in the rain in a simulator is impressive, because you're doing that all through feel in your hands. You know, some drivers out there might have full simulator motion rigs and the likes of that, but for the majority of drivers, you're driving out and trying to get as much feel for grip through your hands, and it's not an easy task. 2 hours, it's a long drive. I know it's split up, you go into stints with other drivers, but it's not an easy task, and I just, again, I like the warmth of this commentary box. I don't want to put myself into a car. I like the fact that we get to watch these guys go through this.
Yeah, George, you're absolutely right. I mean, it is tricky conditions. It is fun to watch from us or for us. And you know what they say, if you don't like weather, then you play an indoor sport. And all of these gentlemen and ladies have decided to not do that, which must mean they are okay with the weather. But that does not help some of the time whenever maybe your car is not one of those cars that's beneficial to be driving out here. So round of applause, though. The amount of times that we've seen cars go sideways and save it is actually pretty darn impressive as well. And that sort of explains why they're all out here on display as well. Got some more bad news for you. Lap 30 incident, T3, that's turn 3. The 777 and the 44. The 44 was given a warning. 44 is the leader of the race, of course. And then the very next lap, turn 1, the 42 and the 44, 5-second penalty for the 44 for causing a collision. Leader of the race, James Parker, 5-second penalty, and that will be served on his next pit stop. So that will be an additional 5 seconds that he will have to sit in pit road to serve and clear that penalty. I think, Ryan Gill, they can still pull it off, though.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely not expecting this kind of penalty to, you know, to ruin their race or anything like that. 5 seconds, I mean, if I'm being completely honest, Jesse, I think 5 seconds was a bit generous.
Yeah.
For a penalty. I mean, you know, we know that James Parker, look, probably locked brakes going into the corner, couldn't really slow the car down any more than he did, but at the same time, you know, it wasn't as if Stefan Zero was right alongside him or, you know, cutting back in rather sharply. I mean, Stefan Zero's car was already, you know, on the other side of the track when James Parker hit him, so, you know, I'm not too sure if I agree with the verdict on that. Obviously, the stewards will know way more information than we do, but in my eyes, at least, without looking at the incident in more depth, I would say they've got away rather lucky there. I was expecting maybe a 10-second penalty, and, you know, Stefan Zero, he finds himself 14 seconds behind James Parker at the moment, so it's going to have to be a mammoth stint from Martin Schumacher in the final 35 minutes of this race if they're going to take this away from the 44. But anything can happen in the next 39.5 minutes, and in these kind of conditions, well, that could never be more true.
Yeah, we're actually being told by Nico right now that the reason it's a 5-second penalty is it's for forcing a car sort of off track, and they're claiming that the spin was purely on the 42 that was sort of ancillary to the contact. Somebody in chat also made a point. We never got a verdict on the 25 Audi earlier, the Muka Motorsport car, who was involved in an incident with another Aston Martin, or not an Aston Martin, another Audi, I should say. The only reason I could think that we didn't get adjudication on that is because it just wasn't reported by anybody, which is how the steward team works. So it's very possible that it just was not reported at all, and that's how they escaped any sort of penalty for that venture. But other than that, yeah, it's sort of surprising, but I understand their logic. I would have probably went for a stiffer penalty regardless, but I understand that, again, that's exactly what you said, Ryan. We don't have all of the angles, and that's going to be a punt there. Macaulay has just punted a car. That's going to be the lap car. The lap car is going to come back on the track, and it's going to be a massacre. Absolutely crazy to several cars off track there. That's Sebastian Brunier, and there was another car off, and he's going to come back across the track and get Sebastian Brunier. Macaulay, who looked to be the guilty party, was actually somewhat innocent there. Look at the massive spins. Who was that in, I think
Darren
that's a
King.
Ferrari. That's Darren King. You're absolutely correct. That's a blue and orange car. Darren King. Oh, and there wasn't contact there after all. I thought there might be contact there. There was not. Absolute chaos erupts in the penultimate and final corners here. This is not the time of the race to be falling apart, but here you have it. Insane driving, just cars littered everywhere. It looked like a junkyard.
Well, just when you thought the race was starting to calm down a bit, we get a couple of penalties come out to drivers, and all of a sudden, two of the guys at the front of the field are starting to get involved in all sorts of shenanigans, and of course, those incidents will probably be investigated as well for what happened there. Darren King, I think, just lost it on his own. I don't think there's any investigation going to be required into what happened with him, but obviously what happened with Brunier is going to be interesting. And Joe McCauley as well, obviously caught up in an incident with a back marker, and well, that is definitely going to be interesting to see what comes of that. Of course, we do understand that the 25 of Phil Vitt, it was Mitch Abonka in the car at the time of the incident, is still under investigation for the contact with Valentin Barrier. So that incident that, you know, we haven't seen a verdict on yet, that you did allude to, Jesse, is apparently still under investigation, and we should hopefully receive a verdict on that one soon. But chaos ensues in the last 3 minutes.
Yeah, absolutely incredible. There's just so much going on there. I mean, we had Sebastian Brunier, Darren King went off there, and just absolute chaos. It's just, I wonder if one car spun and the rest of them were sort of trying to avoid that incident. But just a quick correction, the teams are not self-reporting in this championship. I was just told. I was just literally jumped and beaten by the stewards. There is no self-reporting. It goes off of the tool that they have that reports all collisions, incidents, and things like that, and that's whenever they sort of review the tail of the tape. I was unaware that had changed or that was different for this championship, but my apologies indeed for that miscalculation. It is not self-reporting. It is done by an electronic tool that tells them that sort of an incident or a close call or something like that has occurred. So that's where they start their investigation, and like Ryan said, they are still looking at the 25 for that infraction that happened ever so long ago, but they did not miss or forget about it, and that is the important thing to note here for those of you still wondering about how that is happening. But my goodness, you think one of our races one time will settle down into a nice rhythm, and it just never does, George.
I think that's the nature of racing, is that drivers are going to keep on pushing through. A 15-second penalty coming out to Valentin Barrier's car at number 39. I think we'll get all updates on that through shortly from you guys. But I mean, yeah, I think drivers here are just pushing to the limits. I think you are maybe also getting a little bit frustrated out on the circuit at some points, and you lose that concentration for a split second, and it can just be absolute chaos for yourself and potentially other drivers on the grid. And that's why there's a sideways Porsche on the pit entry there, as Phil Vitt dives into the pits to go and serve his final driver swap. So James Parker, I mean, up at the front, just to talk about him, he's really starting to find some insane rhythm. The Project Alien number 44 handed a 5-second penalty for the contact, but has now built up a 16-second lead over that number 42 Lexus of Stefan Zero. So the Aston Martin here, the green one featured on screen, really pushing for pace out in the wets and trying to negate any of those or any of that time penalty handed out to them, and they just keep increasing the gap. So it's not just the fact that it's pure pace out on circuit. I'm sure there's traffic at play as well. Look how many cars are out on the circuit if you look at the circuit map on the right side. It's just a good drive in general coming out. So I feel that, to answer your question again, Jesse, yes, there are going to be incidents coming out, and I think it's the nature of guys trying to push in conditions that are not really favorable for really making up for positions. Maybe in a real life race, drivers would be a little bit more cautious of making a maneuver because of the conditions at play and how it could risk up. But in sim racing, you risk getting a time penalty, which is not the same as a life-risking situation. So I think that's where sim racing maybe gets a little bit more exciting, is that in these sort of rainy conditions, you get to see people pushing a little bit more to the limits, and sometimes it does exceed the limits, and we get to then talk about why it hasn't worked out. But for the best part of it, it's mostly exciting and kind of makes for races that might be a little bit more boring in real life to be a bit more exciting, because people can take those risks. That was the Porsche that Martin Lawrence is passing now that was parked sideways on the pit entry on the previous lap. I'm not quite sure what happened there. Ryan, do you have some info on the cars or maybe the penalty that got handed out there?
I definitely do. So the 25 Audi of Mitja Bonke and Phil Witt handed a 15-second time penalty for the contact with Valentin Barria's number 39 Lamborghini. If you did see the penalty given out to the 39, just know that was an error on the timing board, and it was meant to be given out to the 25, and it was quickly amended, so do not worry. The penalty has gone to the 25 car as we expected it to. So, and looking at the timing sheet as well now, obviously Jaroslav Honzik in that car still has to do a mandatory pit stop to hand over to Valentin Barria, and I don't think he's going to be ahead of the 25 Audi, but he'll definitely be much closer once the mandatory pit stops are done. So the penalty for that has finally been given. We're currently on board with Martin Lawrence, and he's chasing down Darren King, who, well, just a few laps ago had a bit of a code brown, it has to be said, Jesse Lee.
Yeah, he sure did. I mean, everybody out here struggling to get the most out of their car, as George said. And sometimes with these Audis, they're notorious for snapping around on you, and that's probably the worst case scenario for some of these guys. I gotta say, a bit of a tragedy for the 25, because they were under review that long. They got a penalty, and just as they got away from their pit box, I should say, that's when the stewards hit them with that 15-second penalty. They didn't even have a chance to serve that in the pit stop. So that will have to be added on to the end of their time, I'm pretty sure. So that's unfortunate.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty much the same thing, right? I mean, the fact that they allowed or added in that you can serve those penalties in the pit box was a recent update coming through. But I mean, 15 seconds whilst you're in the pit box or 15 seconds post-race is arguably just going to be the same thing, right?
It is, but I think from a driver perspective, you always would prefer to not have the penalty on the side of the board. You'd prefer to have served it and know exactly where you are, rather than having to play a numbers game with the calculator like Jesse Lee does every stream. And, you know, I always get the feeling that that's what the drivers prefer. They like to know the score. They like to know exactly where they are, exactly what they need to do, and not have to be playing around with, you know, lap deltas and such, you know, come the last 30 minutes of the race. And that's unfortunately what the number 25 is going to have to do, as Martin Lawrence is finding it a bit difficult to make his way past the OVRC 777 of Mark Whitford, but he has finally made his way past, and I think Mark Whitford just struggling a bit there in those conditions, not intending to hold up the 404 of Martin Lawrence, but the Audi has dispatched the McLaren either way.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned my calculator, because, gentlemen, I have been doing some maths.
We need actually like a little segment with a little like a nice little jingle to it.
Don't give
like
me a segment.
Math with Jesse Lee. Ding, 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 ding.
If you gave me a segment, that'd go straight to my head. But I have been doing some math, and it's all completely hopeless. As James Parker brings in the number 44 for the final pit stop, he will almost certainly serve that 5-second penalty, and he will be none the poorer for it, it must be said. He has a...
Are you not going to give us actual math after throwing with math?
No, I will. I am going to. It's just,
okay.
It's not going to be what normally happens when I say that I've done the math. I have done the math. James Parker's going to be in. He will hand back over the car. Macaulay in second place right now. well, they're so far back that it won't even matter. They're still going to have about a 15-20 second lead, my calculator seems to think, even after the stops cycle through and even after the penalty. So it's not even going to be close. That 44 car has lit up the board here ever since the contact and getting around the other team that they were fighting at the time. So that's pretty much done and dusted. It is going to be all on that team to not screw up this race and keep that 44 out front, because otherwise that's going to be really embarrassing. This is exactly what that team needed this evening. They needed this sort of race to get them into this championship, get them back in it, and just have that result. And they stand to gain a lot of points and maybe even some positions in the championship standings. Joe McCauley is your leader right now. He's a car that has not pitted as the final pit stops start getting underway here. A lot of the top runners already coming in. King, Lawrence, and Lima all in right now, getting their final stops. I suspect McCauley will come in any time now and get his stop done. We're watching Michael Muthen here, who has, I believe that's Jardier right behind. No, that is not Jardier right behind him. That is a lapped car. Michael Muthen, one of the few cars that hasn't come into pit road yet. He's going to cycle into the top 5 momentarily. What a day that the 18 has had. Just sort of, they've been around a lot of incidents, but I don't think they've been in any. Do either of you guys, can you confirm that?
It's been a pretty clean race for them. They were caught up in some nice trains to just follow along and fight for position, but I mean, the car looks relatively undamaged, and to be up towards the front of the order, you can't have gone in and served any sort of damage repairs. You would have been knocked way down. So, for them, I know that they are out of position based on needing to still go in and serve the pit stop, but the number 18 has had a great race. And for them, looking to round it out, 25 minutes still remain in the race. Macaulay, who is our temporary race leader, going to go in and serve the final driver swap out for the number 66. Andres Dedicek will then take over the lead of the race from James Parker. Obviously, they've done their final swap too. So the number 44 will go back into first place. And we now need to see where Schumacher manages to get himself out in terms of the closing phase of the race. I mean, we've seen pace-wise, they have the ability to get through. They did master the pit stops, as JC pointed out a couple of times. But yeah, it's been a good race for the Project Alien car. They've served their mandatory penalty that was handed out to them. So everything now set to lead it out to the line.
I hate to cut in here, but I will. Remember when I said they'd have about a 15-20 second lead after the pit stop? Look at the time gap. It was 20 seconds near enough. And that's why old Jesse Lee has a calculator.
I mean, I like the one time that we've all done comms together, and the one time that your math has been right, that we have caught it on stream now. So, I mean, it will be remembered forever. I always appreciate your calculator work. You've got good fast fingers, Jesse.
Broken clocks were right twice a day there, George Smith. Ryan Gill coming up to the checkered flag here. 23 minutes and some change left. What are you looking at for the end of this race? Of course, we have Dedicek back in the 44 up front. Grant Smith in the 121 Porsche still has to make their stop. Schumacher has promoted themselves back into second place in the 42, but it doesn't necessarily look like it's going to be much of a challenge. So what are our sort of storylines coming to the barn here? Are we focusing on not making mistakes? Do we think that anybody has a shot? What are you looking at?
Well, I think one of the big battles is the one on screen right now. Tinko van der Velde in the 66 being chased down by Mitja Bonker in the number 25. And of course, this car that we're on board with now, the 25, does have a 15-second time penalty. And, well, they have to get past Tinko van der Velde and build that 15-second gap realistically if they want to take a chance at 3rd place, but I don't really think that it's going to happen. Another battle to look out for is Andre Felix and Harry Conway are battling down towards 9th place, and then of course there is also Jackson in the 301 car down in 20th. He's got, well, he's chasing down the likes of Sebastian Brunier, and then he's got Jevremovic catching behind. So there are a couple of stories and battles still to track on, but I think the story of the race, you know, if things finish as they stand with Dedicek crossing the line to win for the Project Alien team, is, you know, a lot of people could pin this race down and say, well, you know, James Parker's an alien, of course the 44 won. That's not the case here tonight. Ondrej Dedicek has more than pulled his weight in that car. He's done a phenomenal job. He's had to race at least 60 minutes here tonight, and he's done a phenomenal job for every minute he's been in the car so far. And 8.3 second gap to Martin Schumacher. All he's got to do for the next 21.5 minutes is keep that car on the track, don't get into any silly incidents with lapped cars, and just bring it home. And what a win it would be for this car. The idea behind this team was for James Parker to bring Ondrej Dedicek, or at least help him get up to the more alien or pro level that he probably should be competing at. And what a story it would be for them to take a race win in the 3rd race of the championship and really throw themselves into championship contention.
I mean, that would definitely be a cool narrative to the story. I don't think that the likes of Martin Schumacher is going to want that story to play out. I mean, I think that 8-second gap to the leader with 20 minutes to go is most certainly there. It looks like the likes of Jackson here trying to get past Sebastian Brunier for position in an overall rating, but Jackson in the AM class trying to get past that Pro 777 in front. And I guess in his mind, trying to make his way up the order to catch up to Slizik in the Bentley, the number 7, who's the next car in position. But he's quite a far way up the road, so he's got to get past the 777 and then some. And at the same time, doesn't want to compromise either of their races in different divisions. So it's all about just showing a little bit of class and respect on track. Sebastian Brunier is not going to just allow Jackson to get past for overall position. I mean, one could say that he also would benefit from not having to battle with the car. And round the outside, the NSX will try to go, staying very wide, giving each other plenty of room. Brunier, a very dominant line through, will give him the drive into the Mercedes complex and give him a little bit more space. But does the NSX try and have a look down the inside? In the background, a big dive comes down from that Porsche of, is that a car for position? I'm not quite sure who's actually in that.
That is. That's the 33. Yes, sir.
But it's a...
Oh, wait.
Oh, no, that's the Porsche. I don't know who that Porsche is.
No,
it's
you're
the same
right.
Porsche
yeah.
that was parked sideways. I'm not 100% sure who it was. So, Jevremovic is most certainly in the same battle there with Jackson in that NSX, but that number 121 Porsche is a car that is not here for in the same battle. And there's a position change almost immediately coming through. It looked like the NSX maybe making a little bit of a mistake, maybe going a bit wide. And through the Schumacher S's, it's going to be a changeover once again. So they dive and change. The Aston Martin then settles back behind the NSX. And Jevremovic is going to be kicking himself after getting the move done, then making a mess of it out through the Schumacher S's. And will then have to chase back down onto the likes of Jackson, of course. They're fighting out for what would be 5th place in class. Jackson currently has that in the top 5. So good racing coming out from the AM division as 18 minutes remaining on the clock.
Yeah, George, I think you said it earlier that this race kind of feels like a marathon. You know, it's only 2 hours, and there's going to be a complete blockage of the track there. The 77,
Brunier.
I have no idea what happened there with the 77. I'd love to see a replay. And
777, Jason.
Yeah, the 777 and wishes Ryan's command, as it turns out. So what on earth? Last we saw, all of these guys had a gap. So here comes the NSX. What happens here that causes an incident? Oh, there's a car in front. Oh, it's the Aston Martin that was stopped in front of the track. The 777 had nowhere to go, and it caused a massive stack up. So the 777 is going to lose out greatly there to a lot of the AM cars. That's going to throw them way down the field, and that is not what you want to have happen at the end of your race. Meanwhile, the Felix and Berrier fight sort of continues here, and now Haynes, pictured here, is back into this, and this is all for about 9th, 10th, and 11th position now.
Really is starting to heat up here into the closing phases of this 2-hour endurance race. All the drivers looking to make up those positions now. You have to get yourself into a shooting spots coming the last 10 minutes, and looks like everybody just winding the motors up a notch and finding a little bit of pace where they can. The dance between Hines and Barrier is definitely one to keep an eye out here. The number 39 Lamborghini leads out here on the number 18 Mercedes, and with 16 minutes to go, it really is going to be a fight down to the line. If the two of them can just continue with this, they do have some cars up in front of them that, of course, adds a little bit into the decision-making process. And it looks like that's Felix, who was the slight cause of some of the incidents that Brunier encountered. So he's a little bit slow out, might have picked up a little bit of damage himself. I'm not quite sure if he got some of that contact, but down the start-finish straight, they drag out, and out to the outside, Dart Hines on the drier line. The Lambo gonna have to go on that inside line. Once again, Hines runs a little bit wide and just gonna have to settle back in for the Mercedes complex.
Well, 15 minutes of racing remaining, and more drama has emerged here. Of course, that Aston Martin of Felix that rather lost it out of the final corner, then created a bit of a cluster, and obviously Sebastian Brunier and Mark Whitford's day goes from a bit disappointing to a bit worse, unfortunately. That car, they've had problems in the first two races of the championship, problems that weren't really their own fault either. And it's just been a really unfortunate season for them, and, well, this race is just compounding that, and they're going to be looking forward to the 2-week break, I think. I know Sebastian Brunier is racing at Bathurst. I don't know about Mark Whitford, but I think they're going to be looking forward to the break, have a Friday off, focus on a different event, clear your mind for a bit, come back. You've still got 5 races of the season to go. You can turn it around. There's plenty of time. And I think that has to kind of be the priority for the OVRC team now, is, you know, clear your mind, focus on the next race. It's 2 weeks' time. You know, just have a bit of you know, rest and relaxation, and come back stronger for the next one.
Guys, I've been doing some maths.
Oh, here we go.
So, Dedicek is leading Schumacher right now. That gap was 8.5 seconds 5 minutes ago. It's now down to 6 seconds. If my math is correct, at the current pace that the 42 is catching the 44, the 42 will get to the leader on the penultimate lap of the race.
Well, the incredible narrative of the Project Alien car might not come true. It isn't finished yet. I did say that the race isn't over until it's over, and Ondrej Dedicek has to bring the car home, not get involved in any accidents with traffic or other, you know, cars. And that's just one of the things that play into this race. And it could just be that traffic is holding up Ondrej Dedicek at the moment. It could just be that Martin Schumacher is absolutely possessed here at the Nurburgring. for this final stint and could be looking to take that win away from the Aston Martin. We'll keep you up to date on whatever happens in that battle. But right here, right now, Andre Felix has got Mark Haynes right behind him. And this is the battle for the last spot in the top 10 here. It's Aston Martin versus Mercedes. And Andre Felix has had quite an eventful race so far, and he's going to be hoping that these last 12 and a half minutes are going to be somewhat less eventful.
It's always something that you hope for. I don't think it always comes right. The final 10 minutes becomes absolute madness. And if you haven't enjoyed the racing so far, I think the closing phases of these enduros is where it gets real exciting. I always say to some of my friends that aren't always the biggest race fans is, you know, watch the starts, then have a little power nap if you need to, but definitely set yourself an alarm for the closing 20 minutes. And if you need a little bit of extended sleep, then wake up for the last 10, but do not miss that closing 10 minutes. And we're getting so close to that now as we continue to watch Felix defending as he must against Haynes. Over to Jeromovic in that number 33 as he continues to chase down onto Jackson in that NSX. Not too many NSXs on the field as far as I am. Ooh, big dive coming down. Well spotted.
Is that Felix?
Out there. Can we please? It is Felix coming down, but can we please just watch that awareness coming out from the NSX as he sees the dive coming in? So there's maybe two moves that we get to see in this replay. I'm not quite sure, but Felix coming down into T1, moves himself over onto the dry line. Oh, he has to pull out, and that's going to cost him big time. Just look at that. Spots the dive coming down, does the NSX.
That is
a 2-for-1. 2-for-1 camera action caught by Ryan. We get to see Aaron Jackson's spatial awareness paying off. Turns out, and of course, manages to avoid the contact, keeps both cars in the running, and maintains the lead over Jeromovic in that number 33.
I have said this plenty of times before. Perception is such an underrated skill in racing. It really is. People don't realize how important or how valuable it can be to spot an incident happening before it has happened and take avoiding action. You will gain in most of the occasions. You know, the guy doing a dive bomb or the guy braking late is not going to win out most of the time. It's worth avoiding that contact if you can avoid it, because you'll gain out in the long run. And speaking of gaining out,
no!
The 166 of Gillies hits into Jason Isherwood. The 147 Retro Esports Aston Martin is turned around.
You saw that coming, didn't you? You had to feel like that was coming.
Yeah, and we'll get a replay here. As you can see, the Porsche catching up to the back of the Aston Martin.
Look at Isherwood. Look, he pushes him as far to the left as he can, and no hope. Gillies just goes for it, and there's no hope there.
You also, I mean, a big squeeze coming out there as well from Isherwood, and into that complex of corners, then turns in quite aggressively through Ryan. I think it goes along with your point of, you know, that awareness side, that if there is a potential big move coming in, staying a little bit wider out, even if that driver's pushed the limits, sometimes saves you a little bit of time off track. And unfortunately for the Retro boys out from South Africa, that's not gone the way that they would have wanted it to go. It'll be a busy day for the stewards. I see them shaking their heads at us from their box. Not what they wanted to have a look at in the closing phase of the race at all. 8 minutes 30 left on the clock, Jesse.
Yep. Hey, George, you know what I like about our job in comparison to theirs? People don't get nearly as mad at us as they get as mad at them. And whenever the race ends for us, we get to go home, and they still have to do math. That's why I'm doing this job. But, like I said, my previous math, the gap from Dedicek and Schumacher is coming down. It has slowed a bit. It was as small as 5 seconds at one point. Some people in our chat are theorizing it's all to do with traffic. I can confirm that it isn't all to do with traffic, though some of it is. So that perception is correct. But Ryan, also to your previous point about perception in racing, there's only one other person that I know of that I've seen that has as good a perception at missing incidents as you, and that's also RCI's own Jake the Bosmeister Boswell. That man can spot trouble. Fabian Schmidberger, it's been a long day, who is in our chat right now, can confirm, because he's his teammate, the ridiculous incidents that Jake Boswell has missed based on pure perception of backing out of a situation. And Ryan, I see you do that all the time, and that is 100% accurate. That is a underrated race car driver skill. As Johnny Cash said, you got to know. Wait, that's not Johnny Cash. That's a different person. But anyway, you got to know when to hold them, know when to fold them, and know when to run. And that is very, very true. And that is not a Johnny Cash song, but I tried to make it one just there. Looking at Mark Haynes here, who is attempting to get by Mr. Valentin Barrier. Can he do it here in the closing minutes of this race? Rain has been relentless, conditions relentless, and drivers relentless. Coming down to the checkered flag, I am losing my marbles, and again, what George was saying earlier is incredibly true. It feels like you've ran a marathon, even though it's only been 2 hours. And that's sort of the conditions, because you have to be at peak alertness, don't you, George, to get through a race like this?
Yeah, you can't have a lapse in concentration, even for a slight second. It can all go wrong. And I mean, what a worse time for it to happen, having the race unravel itself all the way towards the final line. Valentin Barrier here going to be under attack from Heinz until the line. I mean, 6 minutes on the clock for them to do this out. Oh, inside line potentially left open there. Heinz spots it out, looks to put a nose in. Barrier promptly shuts the door and denies access to the Mercedes. Now down to the chicane. Barrier going to commit himself as far as he can down to the inside, and right onto the back end of the Lamborghini goes the Mercedes. A flash of the lights to say, you are very slow through there, mate. I could have taken you. It's the mind game flashing going down, and Heinz has to continue to chase down the line. Again, we see drivers electing to go for that inside line, and that will just be for Barrett to come back across. Heinz very late on the brakes, going for a deeper braking point down into T1. Half a second separates them as of the last split timing board, but that of course changes between each corner until they go through the next sector, and it is most certainly a closer gap than that. Good driving coming out from both drivers, pushing for the limits. Heinz is within that top 10, but once you're in that, you're always trying to find more and more. It's all about the points and racking them up, getting consistent points on the board for the duration of the championship, and showing where you stand out of a field like this at the final round is where all of these little bits and pieces go to count.
Well, some people getting excited of the prospect that the 42 could catch the 44. It looks ever more unlikely even as the gap closes, the time beginning to run out, just over 4 minutes, and it's a 4.7 second gap between Dedicek and Schumacher. And I have to say, if there's anyone you'd want in your ear, keeping you calm, telling you you're doing a good job and making sure that you're focused, it's going to be James Parker. As we see Valentin Barrier getting all sorts of out of shape. And Mark Haynes, he could smell blood here. He knows that he can take this Lamborghini. He knows that they're struggling. And he has every reason and every right to believe that he can overtake this car in the last 4 minutes of the race here, coming up towards the chicane. Nothing going to be doing this time round, but there's definite belief in this GT Series number 8 Mercedes that they can beat the team partnership of Jaroslav Honzik and Valentin Barrier. Yes, they're in the wet. Yes, it's a Lamborghini, but the pride won't be lost on that.
Yeah, Mark Haynes doesn't care.
The team that is Valentin Barrier and Jaroslav Honzik, of course, the Ass Heat TX3 combo drivers, big names, and to be able to push them in a race and look to take a position off, that's always a fun feeling for a sim driver. So Mark Haynes doing a great job to keep that number 39 very honest all the way to what feels like the very end. And it's been respectful racing where the Mercedes gets a little bit too close to the back end of that Lambo. You do see him visibly back out. Big squiggle coming out on the exit there as they make their way down to the left-hander. And Mercedes, definitely, Ryan, a little bit more comfortable in the wet, so playing into their hands here at this point in time. But a good race nonetheless between drivers that are showing each other respect and giving us a good spectacle in the closing phase of the race.
This is pretty good. I mean, right up until the final buzzer, these guys are likely going to be fighting each other. It might come down to a desperate move. For those of you that may have thought maybe the conditions were improving, that spray of water coming across the track will dampen, no pun intended, any thought of that as you see it there again. I love the graphics in ACC. Not only is the racing realistic, but everything else as well. Coming in the final 2 minutes, doesn't look like a battle between the 42 and the 44 is going to happen. Schumacher, though, is trying his hardest. Still 3.2 seconds adrift of Dedicek. And like Ryan said, if there was anybody in your ear that you wanted to be telling you that you've got this, bring it on home, it would be Mr. James Parker. And that is exactly what's happening right now, I would guess.
Well, they'll be coming on to the final lap of the race on the next time round. I can see Ondrej Dedicek coming up towards the chicane now as Valentin Barry has gone deep.
Oh.
And this is going to allow Mark Haynes the chance. Is this the chance? Ooh, slight bit of contact there maybe between the Lamborghini and the Mercedes. And Valentin Barrier really starting to feel the pressure from Mark Haynes now, and this is exactly what Mark Haynes wants. He's in his head, he's got Valentin Barrier under pressure. Ondrej Dedicek starts the final lap of the race. It's 2.5
Schumacher
seconds.
is 2.5, Ryan. He is, I mean, he's right on this. If they wanted, the spectators wanted the leaders to get any closer to one another, that certainly did just happen. 2 seconds falls away just like that between the two of them. Mark Haynes and Barrier give us a phenomenal spectacle, and big contact coming in. Haynes misses the breaking point. Barrier gets sent around, and the predictions from our chat were that these drivers were getting a little bit too close and a contact was incoming, and they were not incorrect there. Haynes, the collision coming through. Stewards will be busy even down to the final lap. Felix in that 6.75. He's looking to potentially get himself into the top 10, but he's got a 5-second penalty to his name, so he won't do even if he gets past. But the number 18 could also be given a time penalty coming out here post-race. So Felix needs to hang on to the back. Our leader, Ondrej Dedicek, in the Project Alien number 44 will be our car to follow up until the very end. And of course his co-team pilot James Parker having done a great job here, and the reins now in the hands of Dedicek. Jesse, what a great drive it has been for them, and I don't see Schumacher taking this off them down the start-finish straight. We do see him in sight, but I don't think it's going to be a fight down to the line.
Well, speaking of fight, it has been won for Schumacher and his number 42 Lexus team. They fought through adversity today. They fought through the field. They've had the right strategy, and at the end of the day, they're going to come up just this close. Less than 2 seconds to gap, but the story is Project Alien. Dedicek and Parker, they've not had the race the season so far that they would have liked to have had, but the project has been confirmed, and it will be a win for Dedicek and Parker today. Project Alien ranks supreme. Schumacher comes in at a solid second place after a hard-fought day. Less than 1.5 seconds the gap. Not a bad finish. Keep your heads up, gentlemen. What a race. And after all of that, the 66 Mercedes, did we even mention them at all today? Tinko Vandervelde will come across the line to confirm third and final step of the podium. And what will likely be a race full of positives and negatives. Mitja Bonka, as some of the teams cross the line and celebrate, will come across the line in 4th place, but will likely be moved down to 5th place. It doesn't reflect in these standings, but either way.
Carsten takes the win in the AM division, 12th overall in the 222 Audi.
Indeed. We didn't really talk much about the AM battle today. Our apologies for that. Karsten, 3 out of 3 to start this championship. They've had 3 poles, 3 fastest laps, and 3 wins. Has the triple to Audi team. Fantastic job. Serafini Dancy is going to be 2nd place in AM class. That's 722. And waiting to cross the line is that battered car of Aaron Jackson, who Jedi'd his way out of an incident earlier. One of the only Hondas in this field. Confirmed the 301 in 3rd place in AM. But Dedicek celebrating for the first time with James Parker getting that car all sideways. That's a feel-good story, Ryan.
Yeah, it definitely is, and I can tell you, I was teammates with this guy for an OTL championship about 8 months ago, I think it was. And Ondrej Dedicek, he's a completely chill, down-to-earth kind of guy. He's really likable, he really is, and I'm so happy for him, because this is a guy that I drove alongside, and he's come so far in the 8 months that I've known him, from racing alongside him as a teammate to now watching him pick up a win here alongside James Parker in the Endurance Championship. Like you said, Project Alien is really in effect, and these guys, I mean, maybe you play it down to conditions, maybe you play it down to the track, but you can't take this result away from Ondrej Dedicek. He fully deserves it. And I tell you what, James Parker will be more than thrilled for him as well in that team. He'll be so happy that they've been able to pick up a win this early in the season as well. And there's high hopes for this team for the rest of the championship.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, you can go ahead and chalk this up. They're back in this thing. They were on the verge. If they would have had a bad day today, they would have been on the outside looking in. But they had the best day you could possibly have, pole in the win. And it wasn't always like that. They had to race hard. They had to make up positions. They had to make passes for the lead. Remember, the 42 was in front of them at one point. They had to make the right decisions at the right time and drive their race to get back in the victory lane. And I know Parker is going to be happy for Dedicek. Parker's happy for Parker because he is back in victory lane too, and they have a shot at this thing. Feel good story. Project Alien, after the first 2 rounds, we were kind of wondering how long it would take. We don't have to wonder anymore. It's now. This team can win now, and they have. And I can't wait for 2 weeks. I can't wait to see round 4.
Yeah, and of course, it is going to be 2 weeks between now and the next race in the championship. We have a 2-week break, kind of a mid-season break that we're going to be calling it, even though it's not taking place exactly halfway through the season, but we'll roll with it nonetheless, and it will be 2 weeks until we go to the Nurburgring, which is going to be a really interesting circuit to have a 2-hour endurance race on. Quite a twisty, technical circuit. And of course, no room for mistakes around there. And that's going to be happening in 2 weeks' time because, of course, next week we have the 12 Hours of Bathurst, the one that everyone has been looking forward to for the last few weeks. We had qualifying last weekend. That was absolutely amazing. If you haven't seen the qualifying session yet for the 12 Hours of Bathurst for the Pro and Pro-Am split, go back and watch it. It was absolutely amazing. I had the pleasure of commentating alongside Mike Jones for that one and Nick Setnick, who was behind the cameras. And I'm going to be joining George Smith for the start of the race for the 12 Hours of Bathurst. And Jesse Lee, you're going to be joining Mike Jones as part of Team 2 for the Bathurst 12 Hour. And yes, the entire race will be broadcasted live with commentary. So if you've got nothing to do on the 17th, well, just sit down and enjoy 12 hours of Bathurst action in ACC. It's going to be absolutely incredible. We have some amazing names and amazing teams in that race. And of course, the race program is going to be coming out next week as well. So if you haven't, been excited already, well, there's just another reason to get excited. But before all of that kicks off, next Monday we do have the McLaren Masters Cup. Round 5 at Spa-Francorchamps will be taking place, and it's going to be really, really cool to see those McLaren 720S and 570S cars around Spa-Francorchamps. And, well, that season coming towards its conclusion. Joe McCauley still leads the championship, but the race been blown wide open after he had a bit of a difficult race at Suzuka. But nonetheless, our focus on Monday and then towards Saturday. So we do thank you very much for joining us here tonight. As always, massive thank you to our stewards who have done a phenomenal job throughout the race. Big thank you to our partners, Race Department AK Informatica, Race Speed Labs, and of course Next Level Racing, who'll be providing a prize sim rig giveaway for our 12 hours of Bathurst. And of course, a big thank you to all of you guys here tonight watching, and especially to George Smith and Jesse Lee for joining me here in the commentary box. It's always a pleasure to have either of you two in here with me, never mind both of you. And I'm sure we're all looking forward to Bathurst, and we're all looking forward to the race in 2 weeks' time as well. So, thank you very much for watching, everyone. We hope you have enjoyed the race tonight, and, of course, enjoy the rest of your weekend, and look forward to next week for the 12 hours of Bathurst.
When you feel it's hopeless, when you think that you lost, oh, I will take your hand and we'll rise up from the dust. Oh, here we go, 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 let us heal and grow. You won't be alone, we're unstoppable. Don't be afraid to show what we're going for. This is what we know. Here we come back to life, we're still breathing. Standing up, everybody's gonna see it. Oh, all you need to know is that we're holding on. Even if we fall, we will rise up and we follow the path that we believe in. No, we're not gonna stop until we reach it. Oh, all you need to know is that we're holding on. We rise up from the dust and claim our throne. We rise up from the dust and claim our throne. We all have our reasons why we are on this track. Oh, we all have our burdens, yeah, but we just keep on fighting and we never look back. Here we go.